Hey everybody, happy Monday. This is Charlene O'Hanlon. Welcome to another episode of TechStrong TV. Today is Monday, January 25th, and we have a great lineup of interviews and conversations in today's TechStrong TV broadcast. Last week, we had the Predict 2021 Virtual Summit. That was a great two-day event. Would highly recommend that you check it out if you didn't get a chance to last week. You can just go to predict2021.com and get all the information. But before we get started with today's TechStrong TV broadcast, wanted to put that little bug in your ear so that you'll be able to check it out. But on today's broadcast, we have, as I said before, a great lineup of interviews and conversations, starting with one that Alan had with Chris Farrell from Instanta. You know, Instanta got purchased by IBM not too long ago, and since it became part of IBM, it's now included in developer packs. And so that actually brings a level of observability to a wider audience, which is great for Instanta. So Chris and Alan have a conversation about what's going on with Instanta since becoming part of IBM and how it's kind of changing in the face of greater DevOps and being under the IBM umbrella now. Then Alan has a conversation with Abhinav Asthana, who is the CEO and founder of Postman. You know, Postman has been going great guns. They recently raised another $150 million in venture capital. That's a pretty impressive amount. They are continuing their mission to bring API integrations to the developer world. So Abhinav Asthana and Alan discuss what is in the latest release of the Postman technology and what the company is planning to do with that $150 million financing round. After that, in our, we have a next episode or next edition, actually, of the Haunted Hacker podcast, as we are doing with all of our Haunted Hacker podcasts, splitting it up into 3 segments. Today is the first segment. This one is a really, really great conversation. Mike Jones, who is he's the host of the Haunted Hacker podcast. He has 2 guests on this episode or this show. We have a quote-unquote Ghost Exodus, Jesse McGraw, and Patrick, a.k.a. John 5, from ETA and Anonymous. They're both pretty well-known hacktivists, and as is Mike Jones, and they have a great conversation about, I guess, hacktivism and so much more. And today you can check out part 1 of the 3-part conversation. After Haunted Hacker podcast, we have our Something Old segment, which is a recent previous episode of the DevOps Unbound series that we have on TechStrong TV. In this one, we have Sean Kelly of Tricentis and Paul Pinkney of Swisslog Healthcare, as well as Paula Goyanis of Launch Darkly. They have a really interesting conversation about accessibility and usability design in DevOps. This is something that actually, this topic has been growing. It's been growing louder over the last, I would say, 9 months or so, since a lot of folks started working from home full time, and really kind of started to shine a light on the need for accessibility features in online websites and other online applications. You know, as folks are working from home, they're on their computers full time. And so obviously for folks who are light sensitive or sight impaired, or have hearing impairments. There are, obviously some issues regarding how well they can use a lot of the features on websites, and so the trend is growing that developers really need to consider accessibility and usability in designing applications and websites. So great conversation they have, and it's definitely food for thought. After the Something Old segment, I come back with the headlines for the day, as I always do. And then I have a conversation with Kev Bream of Immersive Labs. This is a DevSecOps conversation, and it's one of many DevSecOps conversations that we have here on TechStrong TV. But this one, we focus mostly on how organizations need to unite both security and DevOps teams so they can better work together to defend their organizations as a whole. Obviously it's kind of a fundamental of DevSecOps that there be unity between development and security and operations. Everybody needs to work hand in hand. One of the problems that has been plaguing the adoption of DevSecOps is that disconnect that still exists. In addition, DevOps teams need to have a better understanding of some of the capabilities of security precautions as they're developing apps. So they need to have a better understanding overall of what security means to DevOps processes and DevSecOps, and in building applications and tools and technologies necessary for implementing DevSecOps. So he and I have what I hope to you will be an illuminating discussion about DevSecOps and where the disconnect still lies. After our conversation, I do the webinars preview. As always, I let you know about 3 webinars that are coming up that I think are worth your time to sign up and attend. And after that, we go into Mitch Ashley's Analyst Corner segment. As always, he has a conversation with Chris Triolo, who is the Vice President of Customer Success at FireEye. And they talk about the increasing need for extended detection and response technology, XDR technology, and security automation as Security Operations Center personnel adapt to increasing workloads. Definitely a timely conversation in light of digital transformation and the greater number of cybersecurity threats that have happened since the onset of the pandemic, and folks are working from home, and then they go back to the office, and then they go back home again, and it's kind of a hot mess sometimes. So definitely a conversation between Chris and Triolo worth checking out, or Chris and Mitch, I should say, worth checking out. All right, great lineup on today's episode, and we will get things rolling right after this commercial message. All right, welcome back. First up, we have a conversation between Alan and Chris Farrell of Instanta, talking about Instanta being a part of IBM since its acquisition and now being included in developer packs, and what that means for Instanta and observability in general. So let's give this one a listen.
This is Digital Anarchist.
Hey everyone, this is Alan Schimmel. Thanks for joining us here on another TechStrong TV segment. My guest this segment is Chris Farrell from Instanta, which is now part of IBM, and Chris is going to tell us kind of all about that, as well as sharing some recent research and news from Instanta. Chris, why don't we start though? First of all, thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
No, my pleasure. And why don't we start? I think most of our audience probably already knows, or at least they think they know about Instanta. But why don't you give us a little Instanta background right up through being part of IBM now?
Sure. So Instanta is now about 5 years old. We've had a product out for about 3 years. we really came out as the new way of monitoring and managing cloud native applications, containerized microservices, orchestration, all the things that you like to associate with modern applications. Of course, recently that means talking about observability. And so one of the interesting things that people that might have looked at us before but might not have seen us lately is that we've been talking about a new way of observing applications called enterprise observability. And one of the things that we have kind of done with that is we've created a situation or a platform of our own called the Enterprise Observability Platform. Now, this is not a new product. It's just built on our automated application monitoring solution. We've extended out to do all the things that you would expect and want from an observability solution. And that means, again, being able to handle all the nuances of cloud native applications, especially orchestration, and what a little bit of what we're going to talk about today is an announcement around deployment for serverless environments so that you can monitor and observe serverless environments in reality with us the same way that you do traditional or non-serverless environments. Of course, the big news recently was that IBM acquired Instanta right at the end of last year. It was announced in November. The acquisition happened right at the end of December. And it's a really nice fit. And we're actually part of the hybrid cloud team, the hybrid cloud integration team. And the reason that IBM wanted to bring Instanta into play, and there's several great blog posts about this out there from both sides, the IBM side and the Instanta side, is that observability is becoming a huge part of success as far as deploying and operating hybrid cloud environments. Now, interestingly enough, of course, IBM had other parts of their solutions for hybrid cloud integration around automation. And as you know, from talking to both me and Pablo in the past, automation's a big thing for us. And we're going to talk about that a little bit today, but IBM is a big thing for them too. So it's a great fit within their automation practice in the hybrid cloud environment. And if you think towards the future, Instanta had some machine learning and AI as part of what we were doing. And of course, AI ops, and specifically Watson AI ops, is a big deal over at IBM. So it's a really nice fit as far as solutions looking ahead for modern environments.
Excellent. Thanks for that, Chris. All right, let's jump into what the kind of meat of the actually, before I do, you mentioned a few blog articles. They're on the Instanta blog for anyone who wants to go check that out.
They are, and like I said, they're on both sides, but we have links to the IBM side, a couple of both. There's actually several that talk about observability, IBM, AI ops, hybrid cloud, and Instanta.
Got it. I just want to make sure we give people, we close the loop on that. All right, let's jump into, the meat of what we want to talk about today. Why don't you go ahead, Chris?
Well, as I mentioned, one of the really important aspects of what Instanta delivers is this idea of enterprise observability. And for us, that's really three things. It's about automating the entire monitoring process, delivering context for every piece of information, whatever that information might be, taking intelligent action based on those things, not just having data for the sake of data, and then wrapping it all up in a very easy to use solution or platform that everyone, all the application stakeholders can use, as opposed to just a few ops people. That's the premise behind our enterprise observability piece. When it comes to things like serverless technologies and being able to monitor applications operating on those, it was really important to us, even from the start, to provide the same level of details, the same level of observability or visibility, however you want to think about it, monitoring and tracing, and being able to troubleshoot all those things just as you would as if it were a traditional, or more traditional, I should say, set of platforms and code running in services that weren't necessarily serverless. So this has always been something we cared about, and we've made some announcements in the last year about operating on Lambda, operating on Fargate, operating on Google Cloud Run, as far as being able to monitor and trace workloads in these environments, just the same as if they were in virtual or hosted environments. Well, what we announced last week was we actually became the first observability vendor to release a cloud native build pack for deployment of monitoring into Google Cloud Run environments. Now, let me take all the technical mumbo jumbo out and just say, what does that mean? That means with literally a command line, anyone that wants to deploy their applications via build packs now can just add monitoring right in, and we get deployed out there as a monitoring and tracing tool just the same way as they're deploying their own code and applications. The idea, just make it the whole process super easy, and it really just maps to what we're trying to do, which is make our platform and our solution as available and useful to everybody that has to deal with applications today.
Absolutely. We did a segment earlier this week, Chris, on cloud packs, the IBM cloud packs and stuff that they're pushing out. I think it might have been with GitLab or one of the other providers that are going to be in part of those cloud packs. And this whole sort of strategy by IBM of packaging up complete solutions rather than point products, right? And saying, hey man, you want to go cloud, you want to monitor stuff, you want to run your infrastructure this way. Here it all is. Here's the package, right? Just add water. Boom, you got it. It makes it so much easier, because here's the deal, right? So many people out here watching this, large organizations, they're in multi-cloud and hybrid cloud environments, right? They got a little bit on Amazon, they might have a little bit of Microsoft, a little bit in Google, right? They might have some private cloud. And what they're faced with is like, Amazon has its own set of solutions or add-ons or, little things that make it work. Microsoft, Google, private cloud, they all do, right? Red Hat even, and all of them. But the idea of what IBM's trying to do with these packs, which is, whatever you're using underneath becomes not immaterial, but it's all fine because everything you need is right here in this pack. And that shouldn't be lost. That's a great, uptake for these people.
Well, you bring up a really interesting point, and to kind of talk about from an analogy from an Instanta perspective, what you're talking about doing is actually, it is a really important value proposition of what IBM brings to the table, because IBM has so much expertise and knowledge across the entire technology landscape, and these cloud packs really allow IBM to bring all that to bear and make it easier for everybody without having to go build the expertise, but rather have IBM's expertise help them instead. And in reality, we, the industry, hybrid cloud and multi-cloud are not going away. This is the way things are going to operate, because everybody needs to make the best decisions for their piece, whether it's an individual service or an individual application or even a distributed set of applications. And we see this again, from an analogy, we saw this in the idea of how you develop a cloud native application, where if you have a larger distributed development team, every engineer makes their own decisions on what code, what platform, what pieces they use on the back end. And to limit that choice by having a monitoring tool that can't support all the things that you want to do really hinders your development team. And the same can be said in the broader operations. If you're limited in which cloud technologies you can choose or pick, Or maybe you like to run Amazon workloads, but you also like to run hosted databases, but if Amazon's databases didn't work with the other pieces you had, that wouldn't really help you if you had this multi-cloud environment. So the cloud packs from IBM help smooth all that out. And what we're trying to do from the monitoring perspective is provide that same cross-level detail. And we've been able to do that with the cloud native ideals for years. But if you think about the CI/CD pipeline, one of the things that we're all trying to do with our CI/CD pipelines is automate everything, right? If you think of every step, there's all kinds of tools for automating. And if you don't automate monitoring, you have this beautiful, wonderful, smooth thing that then runs right into a roadblock when it comes time to say, well, is it doing what we want it to do?
Right.
And that's why we, Instanta, think that it's just as important to have these deployment options that automate and work within the scope as well.
Yeah. I had a conversation yesterday we do this every other week video show called DevOps Unbound. And one of the conversations we were having is, with everything we've seen, observability is obviously a big thing this year, right? And sort of post-deployment management and monitoring. But we forget the feedback loop aspect of it, which is, that feeds directly back into your CI. It should, if you're doing things right anyway.
Right.
It should feed directly back into your CI/CD pipeline,
Yes.
right? And manifest itself in not just patching something you might have saw here or there, but making the apps better, making your whole infrastructure work better, right? It's all that. It's a closed loop system in some regards. Maybe not closed loop, but it's a loop system where that gets right back into it, right?
It's a really important aspect to talk about. And one of the main differences between what organizations are looking for today in, let's say, monitoring in general, but observability, one of the big things they're looking for is something that everyone can use, not just a few guys on the DevOps team or the traditional ops team, that they're going to go in with, let's say, a legacy APM tool, and they learn how to interpret data and reverse engineer things and do all kinds of stuff, and then only involve certain individuals, as opposed to a tool that everybody uses all the time, that helps them target opportunities for improvement, that helps them target opportunities for more scale, that can show where hotspots are, and can do it in the way that everybody needs. Like the data that a developer needs or an engineer needs to make changes to their code to understand what it's doing is not only just a different set of data. And it's not like a whole different set of data, it's just a nuance. But they also want to see it differently. So an operational graph isn't going to help a developer optimize their code. By the same token, a profile of a process isn't going to help an ops guy understand how the pieces are working together.
Got it. So Chris, we sit here in 2021 now. 2020 is in the rearview mirror. We're still dealing with some of the same issues, though. How ready is the world for this? I mean, if you know what I'm trying to say, right? Are we still trying to I called it the hair on fire mode, right? Are we still just trying to do everything we can because, we're operating under emergency conditions? Or are we ready to sort of normalize and start using these sort of packs and, solutions that'll allow us get back on a quasi-normal kind of transformation path?
It's a really good question. And there are two aspects to it. One is, of course, that last year, because everyone went virtual, we had such a requirement and impact on all the applications. I think of last year as kind of, this is what we, the entire IT industry, were kind of building ourselves up for. We just didn't know it. who knew that, last year would require us and force us to be application centric in everything that we do across our lives.
Mhm.
And it really, to me, it brings up a point that I've mentioned a lot. I wrote it here and there in blogs, is that every application is important to somebody. It used to be, if you think back, and when I say think back, we literally could probably back up 2 years, and there's still people that talk about this. We probably have people today that are going to say, "Oh yeah, we do that." Where, because of how much effort it took to deploy, or what the costs were, or that the fact you weren't going to be able to do anything with data. I can't stress that enough. Collecting data for the sake of collecting data is a waste of time and money. You want to be able to do stuff with your data, but you couldn't necessarily always do that. All those things made organizations decide to make trade-offs of, well, we're not going to monitor that application because we don't have the resources or money to put monitoring on that application. Where we're really going, and I think we're there. Not everyone has bought in yet, but we, as the monitoring industry, as the operational industry, the automation industry over in the hybrid cloud integration part of IBM, Watson AI Ops, automation, we're there from the ability to deliver a cost-effective monitoring across the board so that everyone can make these decisions and optimize. Once everyone buys into that, then the digital transformation ideals of CI/CD and increasing the frequency with which you do updates and releases, giving your engineers the power to just update whenever they need to, all those things that we look at for healthy DevOps and healthy agile development now can really move across the board for everybody.
Yeah, agreed. I think, I'm doing, so later this week, we have this Predict 2021 virtual event, and I'm closing it out on Friday, and I'm talking about time. The time is on my side. Time is on our side is the title of my thing. And I think when we look back on 2020, Chris, there was so much progress made, so much evolution on, on digital transformation, DevOps, all these things. But in some ways, it was done like unnaturally, right? Not in the normal course of, I think you said it, right? We had been preparing for this, but we thought this was going to be a couple of years, not
Right.
10 months. And so in doing it in 10 months, we had this unnatural transformation, DevOps, applications and stuff like that. We're not going to go backwards. We're not going to forget what we've done or undo what we've done. We'll build on it. But I think we're going to get back to the normal ways of implementing these changes and, this progress. It's not going to be, damn the torpedoes full speed ahead. It's going to be, let's do this in a reasonable, logical manner.
I think you're right on to something, and we've seen, not necessarily around digital transformation, but around other IT operational processes in the past for economic reasons, for technology reasons. And what I think has been a common theme across all those changes was that things that we learned as an industry during that upheaval that we liked and helped stayed. And so what it kind of did was it like you said, we started just operating at super high rates of speed and just full speed ahead, and whatever we need to do to get it done. And yes, everything might calm down from the perspective of operational management and things like that. But everyone is used to that speed now. So what they're going to want to do is say, well, we want to maintain that speed, but we want to have processes around it that help us control it, or at least control the quality
in there as well, right? With the acceleration. And that's exactly what I'm actually talking about. I'm glad I was able to run it by you.
Anyway, I like it. It's good.
Cool, man. I'm doing it Friday. I don't even remember when, towards the end of the day, East Coast time. Chris, we're over time though. I got to end this. But you know what? It's been too long. Come back on and visit us again, man.
I'd love to. Have me anytime. I'll come back. We'll have some other fun news later on, so we can always come back again.
All right, you got it. Chris Farrell, Instanta, IBM here on TechStrong TV. Thanks a lot. Have a great day, everyone.
Thanks, Alan.
SecurityBoulevard.com is the leading resource for news, analysis, and education on challenges facing the cybersecurity industry. SecurityBoulevard.com covers all aspects of cybersecurity, including data security, DevSecOps, cloud security, application security, network security, security threats, and more. SecurityBoulevard.com has the largest selection of security content, featuring breaking news, blog posts, podcasts, and more. Visit www.securityboulevard.com to learn more. SecurityBoulevard.com, home of Security Bloggers Network.
All right, welcome back, everybody. Next up, we have a conversation between Alan and Abhinav Asthana, who is the CEO and founder of Postman. They recently got a ton of venture capital funding, $150 million to be precise, and they are continuing their mission to bring API integrations into the developer world. So Abhinav Asthana and Alan, it's a mouthful for me, have a conversation about that. So let's give it a listen.
This is Digital Anarchist.
Hey, everyone. Alan Schimmel here. Thanks for joining us on another segment for TechStrong TV. My guest for this segment is Abhinav Asthana of Postman. Abhinav, welcome to TechStrong TV.
Thanks for having me here, Alan. Excited to be here.
Absolutely. So, Abhinav, I'm pretty sure this is the first time we've had someone from Postman on TechStrong TV. So I always like to ask, especially first-time guests, give us a little bit of your background, what's your position at Postman, how you came to be there, as well as maybe a good background on Postman.
Awesome. Yeah, Alan. So, I've been a developer almost all my life until I became the CEO of Postman. So I've been coding since I was in 5th grade, and all of that work led me to create Postman as a side project of mine back in 2012. I was building a lot of apps, that required what we call APIs. And I found out that at that time, there were no good tools out there. It took a lot of effort to kind of, bridge all these things together. And, I thought it would be good to, have something that I enjoy using. So I ended up creating this thing. I put it out on the Chrome Web Store, and it really took off in popularity by other developers. So we started as a company in late 2014, and just before starting the company, we actually had almost 500,000 developers across the world using the product, and we had already been featured on the Chrome Web Store. People were recommending it and sharing it, so there was a lot of grassroots adoption of the product even before we started. So I, with my co-founders, we were 3 co-founders, we kind of came together. We were very passionate about APIs and, helping developers succeed. And the vision with Postman was to really, build an integrated API platform that both producers and consumers of APIs could use. We started small. We raised our first round in 2014. That's when the company got incorporated. From then on to now, we are more than 300 people in more than 8 countries. We have raised, 3 rounds of funding now, totaling more than 200 million. So it's been a fun journey.
Goodness. Absolutely. And the last round, again, just remind us, was just recently.
That's correct. Right? Yeah. So we raised actually in the middle of the pandemic, 150 million round led by Insight Partners. Wow.
That's right. Our friends at Insight Partners. And that's that's an impressive number. Congratulations to you on that. And we've had a chance to talk to many entrepreneurs who have raised money, who have bought and sold companies during this pandemic. And, I've had a lot of experience over the years doing both, raising money and buying and selling companies. I just can't imagine what it must be like, though, to do when you can't even meet in person. It's got to be a little bit weird. You're talking, and you're not talking $5 or $10. We're talking major, 8-figure deals, and just crazy when you think about it. So congratulations to you and the whole Postman team, though, for on that. If you don't mind, let's turn a little bit to the technology. So, we, to a certain extent, we live in an API-driven world.
Absolutely.
Right? It was interesting. We brought on like 3 or 4 new people after the first of the year here at MediaOps, and we were showing them how all of the different technologies that we use sort of are tied together. And whether it be through things like a Zapier or other kind of API integrations, they were amazed about how all of these tools work together so seamlessly. And I thought back and I said, if you would have told me how this is where the world was going to be 15, 20 years ago, I wouldn't have believed you. Right? Remember back then, you were a Mac or a Windows or a Linux. You were on a Netscape platform or Windows IAE, and you were an Apache, LAMP stack, and things just didn't talk to each other the way they do now. The level of integrations via APIs, it makes the world go round, right?
Absolutely. And we think APIs is, it's all the way down, it's all APIs from that LAMP stack all the way up to, doing, business process integration, or when you are becoming a platform as a company. So I'm totally with you on that.
And then even looking at like the rise, for instance, we've seen low code, no code. Man, take off, right? Everybody's building applications, it seems. But really, I think the secret of low code, no code is that on the back end, you got APIs that allow these things to talk to each other, right? It makes it really easy to build an app, by modules, because the APIs kind of glue it all together. So it's an API world. And your growth, I guess, 300 people, I guess, speaks to that. But you guys recently came out with some new kind of features, environments. Let's talk about that a bit, Abhinav.
Absolutely, Alan. So I think, the point that you highlighted, right? Like it's kind of the thing that you can picture now with APIs, you wouldn't have imagined, a while ago. Like we are seeing that across, the entire industry, in the entire economy, if you may. And, my experience personally was, came through building like those applications, writing code, building an API, building a mobile app. And what I kind of started seeing was that everybody was doing that across, whether you're building internal applications, whether you're building external applications, you're dealing with like hundreds of APIs, all the time. And that was kind of a realization after having built Postman. Postman is primarily used by developers who use it as part of their core workflows. Now what we saw was that there are hundreds of these APIs out there now, thousands, and probably going to be millions of APIs in the future, and you have millions of developers right now. So the primary problem that comes in with all of this API driven world, like machines are really good at talking to each other, like that. We're building essentially APIs for them. But humans are not that good, like we struggle to kind of come together sometimes, what are our shared goals? What am I going to build? How is this thing actually working? Like a lot of questions, start coming up when you look at teams who are building APIs together, or companies, who are incorporating, somebody else's API into their platform. Third-party developers, if you're using like the Stripe API, the PayPal API, Spotify API, you really need to know, how that thing works. How is this thing changing? What can I do with it? Right at the point of, when you are starting with an API, and then in the journey of, the API evolving, as well as your own application evolving. So so this became like a core thesis for us to kind of solve for. Like API technologies are going to continue kind of their march, and the momentum continues to accelerate. But what Postman can solve for is really bringing these people together. And to facilitate that, for public APIs, we launched this feature recently. It's in beta right now, called Public Workspaces. So the way I would like you to imagine, or the viewers to imagine, public workspaces, is that it's a place for APIs. Like the way GitHub is a place for your code, Slack is a place for your messages. Postman public workspaces are a place for your public APIs. What could be in that place is like API definitions, API use cases, how those APIs are changing over time. And what you could do is have the producers and consumers of those APIs really come together in that place. And the goal here is to really facilitate those hundreds of interactions at scale, whether you're dealing with thousands of APIs on one end, or you have like a large team on this end. So we're pretty excited about this feature. It's free for everyone, and you could publish as much as you want, and you could consume as much as you want.
Excellent. And this is available now?
Absolutely, yeah. It's available in our product. You can just sign up for an account and put out a public workspace. We have some interesting ones. We have one by Salesforce, that's just skyrocketing in popularity. We have Twitter, we have Dropbox, we have things in the security side. We have published our own. We published a COVID-19 workspace, for letting people find APIs related to the pandemic and build applications on top of that. All those dashboards that you see out there, are powered by APIs. So what those APIs are, you can discover in those workspaces. And the interesting thing, about workspaces, Alan, is we kind of try to incorporate some of the elements that we have seen in like social products. So for example, you could like watch an API. So one of the biggest challenges with APIs is like you're dependent on an API, and the developer on the other end decides that okay, we need to change it, right, for some good reasons. Now what happens? It creates this whole chain of events. You need to find out how did that API change, what exactly was the change, what do I need to do, and how much am I impacted by this, right? So we saw that recurring problem where people are tracking all of these APIs and kind of trying to keep up. And on the producer side, what we see is that because change management is such a hard problem, people don't change as often. So it's because change is so big. If you make a change, everybody's going to be very upset. It's going to take a lot of time to migrate. So like one example I learned recently was that Salesforce is backwards compatible till 2004. Stripe's API is backwards compatible for 40 versions or something, right? But then every incremental change becomes even harder to execute because you have to think about backward compatibility all the way back. So one interesting thing in public workspaces is this watch button. You click the watch button, and what Postman will do is, it'll take all the changes that the producer has put in and distribute to you while you're working, within the Postman environment. And now, all the APIs that you're dependent on, you can start kind of watching them and take action. And rather than you having to seek out things will be kind of, given to you. So I'm pretty excited about this feature.
Me too. It sounds amazing. One of the things that always kind of, when I see these kinds of models is and really it's part of the open source heritage, right? This open source community where people are willing to put code in. Like there's a Salesforce community, right? And people will submit the code that they've got in there, and we don't worry about, well, who owns that? Do I got to pay a licensing fee? And, all the things that used to be just a real pain and an inhibitor to making stuff work. How did we get rid of all those? How did we get rid of all those strings, all the red tape?
I think with respect to APIs, if I understand you kind of right, I think it's first of all, it's driven by the need to create, bigger and better pieces of software. Consumers just demand more, and it's harder for you to, hire hundreds of people build all those components in-house, deploy them, make them efficient. It's easier for you to, look at like all those pieces that are out there and vetted by the community. And I think the key change that happened, I believe, in open source is that instead of people seeing themselves as just takers of code, they became trusted partners within the community. So that's when the community trusts you and you trust the community. And companies that really, I believe, relied on just home growing everything, would slowly go out of business because the software will fall behind. And, we're kind of seeing a similar trend with APIs. The API movement is developer driven. Developers pick what the best APIs are, which are the ones that are easier to integrate, which APIs have more trust inside them. And companies now need to adapt to that world. What are the things I need? What is my API licensing policy? Is there any form of lock-in there? What are the ways in which you can try out the API? Here's like a funny thing. I saw somebody sending like a 20-page PDF to see, okay, this is our API program. And, at the end of that, there was like another PDF link to just wade through all the legalese, for that. So all of that is just shortened, like it's just a click of a button. So I think it's real consumer and business demands driving this, but in a developer-driven way. And that's what we're kind of seeing with APIs.
Sure. So as we sit here in January and hopefully, this COVID thing by fall, let's say, whatever, where do you see, we've seen a tremendous acceleration of digital transformation, right? DevOps, software, APIs, and API integrations have all really contributed and empowered, I think is a good word, empowered this digital transformation. What do you think in 2021 that accelerates, stays the same? What do you think's in store?
Oh, I think, this is, I guess we're going to look back at this time and see that, there was one point in time or like an year in time where like many consumer habits kind of just fundamentally changed. This would be kind of that year. Not only are we moving to, I'd say, digital storefronts, we are also realizing that the physical storefronts or physical spaces that we were creating, we could reduce their use by half or 75%. You don't need to go to the office like every day. Going for 2 days a week is just fine. You don't need to get your banking done. You don't need to get your groceries done, at stores, because now there are, like you've been and everybody's been running their lives that way. So what I sense is there is going to be, of course, we are all people, we need that connection with other humans. So we're going to go back to some physical stuff. But what we'll understand is like all of the craft and the unnecessary parts of those interactions will, move to digital things, and companies will primarily have like digital storefronts with a physical experience, backing it rather than the other way around. So I think this whole mode will flip. And I think what I see is that, if digital experiences are giving you the full value that you need as a consumer, there are going to be companies that are extremely focused on that. Like I was reading about a bank that is just an API, and that's what their whole storefront is. That's what the experience is, and that API is going to be integrated into applications that you use. So I think it's going to have a far-reaching impact on the existing way of how companies operated, and we'll also see just fundamentally new kinds of companies come up in the future who will treat this as the baseline.
Agreed. I like that future too. I've spoken to some people who think it's going to be like a blip and then go back, but I think it's more, once you're here, you don't go down. You stay here and go up from there. But anyway, we're about out of time. Abhinav, thank you so much for coming on. Wait a second. If people want more information about Postman, what's the website?
It's postman.com. Super simple.
Easy. Okay. Abhinav, thank you so much for coming on TechStrong TV and joining us. Come back and, APIs is something we talk about a lot on here. Come back again and let's talk more about it.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me, Alan. Looking forward to talking to you soon.
My pleasure. Abhinav Asthana from Postman. Go check them out and find out, stay abreast on what's happening in APIs. They're kind of leading the way there. This is Alan Schimmel for TechStrong TV. We'll be right back with our next guest.
ContainerJournal.com is the leading online destination for centralized computing-related content. ContainerJournal.com covers all aspects of software containers, from container management, data management for containers, container security, networking for containers, to the entire container ecosystem, Kubernetes, microservices, serverless, and more. ContainerJournal.com has the largest selection of container-related news, featuring breaking news, blog posts, podcasts, and more. Visit www.containerjournal.com to learn more. ContainerJournal.com is operated by MediaOps Inc., the team behind DevOps.com, Digital Anarchist, SecurityBoulevard.com, DevOps Connect, and DevOpsDozen.com.
All right, great. Thanks. Welcome back. We've now have the latest installment of the Haunted Hacker podcast. This is part 1 of 3. Part 2 and 3 will be running later this week, tomorrow and Thursday. But until then, this one is, as I said, part 1. Mike Jones talks to Ghost Exodus, Jesse McGraw, and Patrick, a.k.a. John 5 from ETA and Anonymous, talking about hacktivism at its finest. So let's give this one a listen.
Cover some news real quick about the past week, what's going on, what has been transpiring this week within the Haunted crew. We picked up a sponsor, actually 2 sponsors. And one of them will be announcing next week when I get the graphics for them. TechStrong TV, of course, is going to air this episode spread out through next week on their TV show, Digital Anarchist. And it's really been growing, man. Like, I don't think I've seen this many people jump into the podcast this early. Like, it's just phenomenal. But yeah, so our group is growing, and we have a lot of really good people joining. Big addition was Ghost and Patrick. And then we also have Alberto Daniel Hill. I don't think he could make it today for some reason, but he's also part of the crew. He's in and out. So, if you guys see him in the Discord, holler at him, make him feel welcome. So tonight, the format's going to be a little bit different. We're going to talk about our stories, kind of talk about the old days, talk about hacktivism, talk about what's going on in the future and today, and all the political nonsense that's going on. So Ryan is going to help me co-host this, and I'm going to ask Ghost and Patrick to unmute yourself, if you don't mind. Yeah, cool. All right. Yo. What's up, guys?
What up? What on?
Man. Yeah, so having Ghost in the crew is kind of a big deal for me because our paths crossed a couple times back in the day. And I don't know if you guys listened to his Darknet Diaries story on that podcast. I think it was episode 70 maybe?
Yes.
Yeah, episode 70. And his actual video of the exploit he did is on YouTube, which was absolutely phenomenal. Props for that. So yeah, back in the day, when I left the military, we started talking about, the state of the world and politics and the nonsense that was going on. And a bunch of us kind of conglomerated together with different people, different groups, and kind of created a big collective. Well, that collective spun off into several different groups. We had other groups joining from other places, and, groups splitting within the group. So hacktivism can get really, I guess, confusing as far as who's who and where everybody's at and what they're dedicated to. And of course, you had people like Barrett, who was a voice for some movements and kind of a pain for the others. So, I mean, it's really like drastic, right? So you guys know my story. I'm not going to bore you with my story. I've talked about it many times. So I'm going to hand this over to Ghost and let him talk about what he's been through, what his story is like, what it's like now, how things are different. Because I know that even technology is much different now than before when Ghost got in trouble. So I'm kind of trying to help like bring technology and kind of show him some stuff. And if you guys want to do like videos and stuff, that'd be cool too. But Ghost, go ahead, man. Tell us what's up.
Where would you like me to begin?
The beginning.
And can you hear me okay?
Yeah. You're good, bro. You're good.
All right. Well, I can tell you where I've been since coming out of prison. It has been relatively difficult trying to acclimate back, into the way things are, and to try to catch up, socio-technologically. So much has evolved. You have to keep in mind that when you're locked up in a cage and isolated from society and from the way things are shifting and moving, you remain the same. Well, everything else is evolving. And so, it was like coming out of a time machine into a world that was not the way I left it. All of technology has changed, and just the way that we interface with each other, the way we interact, it's really strange. Sometimes I talk to my friends about back in the day that we would pick up a phone and we would call each other, but if we were going to do anything outside of that, we'd have to go home and get on our computers. You know what I mean? Now we take it with us everywhere we go, and never leaves our hands. It's right here. It's not far. But I didn't have access to current information while I was locked up. I didn't have access to email systems, and a lot of literature I was not allowed to have. So it made it very difficult for me to understand where things were shifting. Whereas in contrast, I remained the same in the exact state of mind for 11 years. It was pretty radical.
So talk to me about like the literature, right? Because I've had friends in prison for extended amounts of time, and I know getting to a terminal or even getting like literature to read about like technical stuff can be like really difficult.
Literature. The most coveted literature I wanted was 2600 magazine. Okay. Every now and then I could get it smuggled in. But it was really freaking difficult. That's what really helped me understand where things were moving. That sometimes like PC World, things like that. Wired, I'm not a big fan of Wired magazine. Nothing. There's nothing wrong with it. Just not my forte. But 2600, I fought tooth and nail to get a hold of it, and just seeing the exploits that were coming out, the different, just the way like the hacker mentality was like skyrocketing and absorbing new technology and taking it apart and rebuilding it and explaining it to others is just, man, it just blew my mind, and it just killed me not being able to have, unrestricted access to that type of literature. But I'll tell you what, though, I'm a subversive, type of individual. I don't really like rules. One of the first things I did when I got into jail is I would write down everything that I knew about hacking, even the most basic stuff, and I would just give it to people, and they would send it home to their wives or to their kids who needed it done, and I'd show them how to do it. This was like my thumbing my nose at the system. Just writing free literature, just handing it out to people.
That's awesome. It's awesome.
But all that stuff is just obsolete now. All of it.
Yeah. So not only that, but like, when you get out, like it's like you said, it's a totally different world, and the technology is like really, booming. If you look at like 11 years ago, it's just what we had back then is nowhere near what we have today. And I remember like, I sent you the RF dongle, like that didn't exist back in the day. Like that was not something we did,
right.
But but now it's like, you know, in a miniature device, which used to be in a big, huge like radio platform.
Right.
So things are way different. So talk to me about ETA. Tell me about ETA.
Well, it doesn't start with ETA. It actually starts with a group called the Insane Masterminds crew. But anyways, so back in the day, since 1998, I loved being the lone wolf. I like being alone. But at one point in the early 2000s, I realized that I could really expedite, you know, my learning curve by hooking up with other people and seeing what is trending, what is attractive, what are other groups after. And so I ended up being recruited in this crew called I Am Insane Masterminds crew, and it was badass. At first, it was really great. But I felt, you know, the leader of this group, he was like a megalomaniac, just a really just overprivileged kid from Silicon Valley. Man, he was just really nasty. And I was just, you know what, I'm going to create a group of my own. If he could do this, so could I. And so I decided to start the ETA, and I ran it by him because I thought, you know, we were pals, and, you know, he didn't see it that way. And he made a big problem out of it. And he said that he would make me his enemy if I ever did such a thing. And I was just, you know, I wasn't really exposed to this part of the hacker mind, how we can shift allies. We could shift just like at the drop of a dime, and I don't know what triggers it, but sometimes we can do that. And so over the course of a year, I systematically just wiped him off the map. It got so deep that we had ETA members hosting his own forum and websites. So like at the very end, we got rid of them, and we ended up absorbing all of their members and creating a few of our own. And I just wanted to create a platform for people to feel themselves, even if they didn't have the tech savviness as some of us. We trained people who didn't have experience. And if they just really couldn't catch it, you know, understanding how to take things down and rebuilding them in any type of like programming, like HTML or reverse engineering, JavaScript, or just basic shit, we would teach them how to social engineer, and we would utilize them that way, and how to do basic scans. And so everybody had a pocket. And so we had a multifaceted group with lots of different skill sets, and everybody did something on the mission table. And as bizarre as that might sound, you know, it really wasn't about who was the best crew, but we were extremely resourceful, and a lot of things that people don't know that we were able to do ended up in my FBI file, which I've been trying to get a hold of. Right. Like we did a lot of freaking stuff. And any one of the ETA members that are still around today that are not members, you know, they could vouch for that, because we catch a lot of flack because people see that, you know, this stupid video of mine where I'm, you know, lurking around a private clinic with Offcrack installing botnets, that was like all that I knew how to do, and they have it all wrong. And I'm glad they have it wrong, because I really don't care anymore.
That could have made your case a lot more difficult if they knew exactly what you could do.
It could have been a lot worse.
Yeah,
but
like
the video it was a home.
The video was epic, though. The video was when I saw it on YouTube, I was surprised. First of all, it was the actual footage from the attack, and I was like, "Wow, that's bold. That's straight out bold."
I was a maniac, bro. Like I was one of those like overzealous, like maniac fascist, just brain jobs. Like I get these things in my mind, and I'm thinking this is the way it has to be. This was a propaganda video. I needed this to inspire some of the younger hackers to just freaking install our bots on anything they can get their hands on, and let's just go to town. Like, it was a really bad idea.
It was a great video though. It was so awesome. And it's funny because like off crack and booting up to CD-ROM and grabbing the passwords that way, it's actually quite resourceful. Now, nowadays it's a little different. We use like USB and Mimikatz and all that good stuff. But it goes to show like the evolution of technology from back then to now. But I think that all of us as hacktivists were like really bold and brazen, like, hack something and put it in their face. Like, we'll be back, and this is how it's going to be. So at what point did ETA and your path cross my group's path, Anonymous?
Oh, let's see, 2007-ish, 2008. And it's so funny, dude, because I'm going to tell you, like, this is the most embarrassing part. Like, my exposure to Anonymous at the time was the infamous Fox 11 News clip. Like, I'm thinking, wow, these motherfuckers are terrorists. These guys, they're like freaking serious. Like, and we're thinking about Habbo Hotel, throw that in there. Then you got, the other side of the coin, you've got the protests against Scientology. But like my mind, you have to understand the way my mind thinks is I take things very literally. So I'm seeing these video clips. I'm thinking, oh my God, it's a terrorist group. And they all wear this Shakespearean mask. Like, I was afraid to touch it. I sent some of my own members to go investigate it. I was like, who the hell are these guys? And they come back speaking like all that anonymous jargon. And I was thinking, dude, they've got you brainwashed. How could you? Like, they're freaking, you know what I mean? They're flipping sides. You can't double dip when you're with the ETA. Like, come on, man. So when I ended up talking to various members of Anonymous, and they're all just trolling me to death, dude. I'm like, this guy, he's like, I don't even want to get into that's too embarrassing shit. I was looking for the leader of Anonymous. I had no idea that there was no leader, that it was completely decentralized.
Yeah, well, in that token too, it's not truly decentralized. Like, there's a core group of people who like ran the IRC and ran different operations, but I think where journalists get it wrong, especially with groups like ETA and with LulzSec and LizardSec and Anonymous, they try to figure it out, but it's one of those things that they kind of look at it from the outside and try to figure it out, and it's never 100% accurate, because none of our missions would be successful had we not had somebody in charge of those missions, Right. But when I saw that you had crossed Anonymous, I was like, the name sounds really familiar. And I think I remember the conflict that broke out. But it's with every group, right? So we had our own people in our own group, like splitting off, and Sabu and his.
We were trying to understand Anonymous because it was an enigma. It didn't make sense at the time.
Yeah, it still doesn't. Yeah, well, it made sense, but you know what? Like today,
its own twisted way.
Yeah. Today, in our current time and political situation, like Anonymous makes more sense now than it did back then. Absolutely. Yeah. And it's weird. I was going to bring this up. Like, it's weird how, we started this group, Haunted Hacker, and all of a sudden we start getting people like migrating back to that group mentality, and back to the hacking groups. But I think that has a lot to do with the tension in the environment and the overall pulse on the political system, and people just getting screwed over. I think people have had enough. And then when that happens, it's like minds tend to migrate. It's like magnetism.
Exactly. No, you're absolutely right. There's no way that's some of these amazing hacktivist, feats that Anonymous was able to do from 2012 on up, they were like these super secret cell groups. I remember seeing some of these on the news and what I could catch in the newspapers. It's like I was in the wrong era. I just freaking missed it. I was so amazed.
Yeah, it's come a long way.
Yeah.
So.
It was just mind blowing. Yes. So I ended up meeting or speaking to these Anonymous members, and that's when I started to make friends with Anonymous. But like I said to you before, ETA received really powerful offensive, resources from another group called 0 Day Exile, and they were staunchly against Anonymous. So when ETA started to become Anonymous friendly, we had to play both sides of that fence by, making our making our allies happy, while at the same time, pursuing our own path in Anonymous. A lot of people know that, Fixer, which was a prolific ETA member, doubled as Darth Anonymous, and people recognize him at DEF CON. We definitely loved Anonymous at some point.
I think everybody hated or loved Anonymous at one point. I think it went back and forth depending on what we were doing.
Yeah.
So yeah, man, so you're out of prison now, you're free, you're working, catching up with technology, you hooked up with this crew, which, I'm totally glad you found a place to hang out,
I appreciate it.
Yeah. So what do you see for the future, man? The shit's really crazy here in the US right now, really crazy. What's your take on where we go from here?
Well, I know where I want to go, but I really want to get certified in digital forensics, because I think it would be very useful to assist, criminal defendants with their digital forensics. And I got this in my mind 11 years ago because I had the chief forensics investigator for the public defender's office working on my case. He was a complete fucking imbecile. And I don't normally say that about people. I always try to give them the benefit of the doubt, but this guy was an apex idiot. He had been in his profession for as long as I had been a hacker, and some of the no-brainer things we would fight over and squabble. It's Mr. McGraw, let me tell you something. There's no such thing as a certified ethical hacker. There's no such thing. There is nothing ethical about hacking, sir. And we would fight over the dumbest shit. And for example, I used to do a lot of terminal services exploits with remote tops. We would use Metasploit, TS Grinder, TS Crack, things of that nature. And one of the things in TS Grinder, after it would, conclude a dictionary attack, it would say crack successful. I had a screenshot of that once. And he looked at this screenshot as Mr. McGraw, I simulated this. I tried to simulate this in command prompt, a dozen different times. You cannot make it say crack successful. I don't know about you, Mr. McGraw, but I think you fabricated this.
Always. And that was Dallas. That was Dallas County, right?
Dallas.
Yeah.
And this guy inadvertently told me who the CI was on my case.
Nice.
Who does that?
So for people who don't know, so Ghost and the prosecutor that was prosecuting him, the FBI agents that were involved in his case were also involved in Barrett Brown's case, which was also involved in my case. And so it was a triad of bullshit. And yeah. I mean, when you look at the cases publicly, the stuff that they cite and the comments they make, it's almost it was post 9/11, right? So anything that was considered hacking was an act of terrorism. So they really trumped up some crazy ass statements and charges. And I think Fidel, I don't know if you know Fidel, but Fidel Salinas had literally almost 50 felonies for breaking into a school network. Yeah. So he did I don't know how much time he did in prison, but it was a lot.
Wow.
So yeah, the court system is not capable of handling cybercrime. No. And I kind of talk about that in my talks in Europe, is that we need a one court system worldwide, almost like an Interpol type court that has people who knows cyber law and can actually prosecute and sentence, but sentence within reasonable guidelines. There's no reason why somebody who hacked into a computer network should get more time than a rapist or murderer or a pedophile. That shit is unheard of, but it happens all the time.
Yeah, it happened with that civil hacker in Ohio, KY Anonymous. He got more time for doing what he did than the rapist that he was trying to expose.
Yep. And that's pretty common, right? So with Facebook, when we took down a bunch of pedophile profiles, and even when we hit ISIS on Facebook and social platforms, and we destroyed 1,000 profiles, the police and law enforcement were like, look, you're impeding on an investigation. Don't do that again. We'll consider it a crime. And I'm like, really? Like, doing your job's a crime? So, I mean, they really don't have a good handle on cybercrime and what it entails. So with that being said, like the current political situation is so beyond screwed. And I think we're going to end up with some riots and some other stuff. But I do think, so I think that other hacking groups, I know APT 28 has already jumped in. And there's going to be some other groups probably joining. But I think that there's going to be like a mass onslaught of digital attacks like within the next week. Because nobody trusts the government and the way things are going is just so shady. But it'll be interesting to see where, what groups jump up. I know Anonymous is kind of peeking their head out like, hey, we're still here, but I don't know how valid it is anymore.
If I'm not mistaken, there is a anonymous channel on Twitter, and they claim that they have a campaign against the Department of Justice for this year, scheduled for this year. I don't know what that entails any more than the next man, but
yeah, it's interesting that they come up with these operations. The operation against China, they delivered a video and basically said, hey, we've seen the footage leaked from Wuhan, and stop mistreating your people, whatever. And China was like, yeah, go screw yourself. We don't care. But I don't think Anonymous has the power that they used to have. I'll probably get slammed for that all over social media. But it is what it is. So Ryan, what questions do you have for Ghost?
Sorry, actually, this isn't necessarily just for Ghost, but can you guys explain what the political climate's like over in the States at the moment? Like for those of us who aren't from the US?
Sure.
I know it's a shit show, but yeah.
So take a bottle of propane and sit it out like across the field, and then take a 50 cal and shoot that bottle of propane. That's what it's like right now. And both sides are collaborating and doing just some weird shit, and really using the people as pawns, and they're falling for it hook, line, and sinker.
That is so true.
It's horrible. But so that political climate is about to come to a precipice, I guess, probably this week when Biden does his inauguration week. They've already locked down D.C. They've sent something like 10,000 troops into D.C. to take over the Capitol and kind of defend the public buildings. And they're expecting like widespread riots through D.C. and each state capital has been warned ahead of the inauguration. Personally, I don't care. I really hope they burn down all of the government buildings, because they are our buildings, right? We pay them. We should have a right to do what we want to with them. And right now, I think the people are just tired of government, period. It's so corrupt.
It is bad.
And I'll probably get slammed for that as well. But, it is what it is.
It's past the breaking
What are you
point.
doing with yourself these days, man? What do you do to fill your days, bro?
To me?
You.
Well, I was writing for Forklog Media and for Being Crypto. They're an online cryptocurrency technology magazine. But I've taken pause for that until probably about summertime. I'm just working in a warehouse now. I just need to pick up on some money, and but I love writing. That's what I'm going to do. Probably mostly that, and I want to get that certification, digital forensics, and do something, because I'm not motivated by dirty money, and I know that's one of the things I'm going to face if I'm working in the court system. I fucking hate what they do to people, and how they're able to get away with so much because some ordinary people don't know, or they're not tech savvy. And that's one thing I'm going to put my foot down, make sure that doesn't happen on my watch if I can help it, But I've never been motivated by dirty money. I'm not a scammer. I've never stolen money. I've always been happy with money, with what I make. And that's what I want to do. That's what I'm going to do this year.
So the prison time that you served, will that impact your ability to be able to be involved in the court system in the States? Or will you be an outside consultant? How does that work?
I think I think Kevin Mitnick was a president for things like that. I mean, someone like him was able to completely flip the script, so to speak. You know, it may be difficult at first, but I think reputation is the one thing that the courts are more concerned about. If you are a good witness.
Yeah. So another thing too is that there's a lot of people on the speaking circuit when I was in Europe that advocate for giving hackers jobs, right? Like, I think a lot of people over there in Europe understand that we're misunderstood. And the more speaking I did over there, the more offers I got. I mean, I sit on 2 boards of 2 different companies. Who does that? And then when I got a CISO job, the headlines in FinTech magazines was company hires ex-anonymous as a CISO. Like, that was big. I mean, I think that was like the first article that talked positive about people like us and our backgrounds. But, you know, the more that we're vocal about it and talk about, you know, the problems and advocate for other people, like, those doors will open. And they may not trust you with everything. Like, I still run into situations like, so I interviewed with this company in Germany. I was actually given a job. They sent me a contract and it was epic, bro. So the contract at the very end of it was like, are you a member of Scientology? If so, what's your role in Scientology? And I was like, are you kidding me? So you specified Scientology. Does that mean like every other group, like, you know, nefarious group is okay, just not Scientology? And I had to explain to him, I was like, look, if you look at the history of Anonymous, of course I'm not in Scientology. Like, that is a no-brainer. Yeah. But I mean, we're so misunderstood in like business, right? And a lot of businesses want that mystique of, you know, a former hacker like joining their team and helping them out. So I don't think you'll have a problem with that. Plus, you know, the more we can get you involved and get you into media and speaking engagements, that's not a problem, man. So
how do we educate the public about the difference between black hat and black heart? Like,
that's a good question.
Handle that one.
You know, there's a part of my book where I try to break down some of these stereotypes or these categories, because just because someone is a black hat doesn't mean that person has criminally, you know, minded intentions or they're a bad person. I've met some white hats who are pieces of shit. Like, they are bona fide, like, terminally fucked up. That's not to say that all white hats are that way. Of course not. But then I've met some black hats who will, you know, just go out on a limb for a just cause, who don't steal other people's shit, who don't fuck up other people's shit. They just break the law because it's fun, or they just, you know, they'll intrude but they won't steal, or they'll intrude and steal and give away. I mean, you don't know. Like, all these barriers, these categories really don't work. I don't think they work.
No, they don't.
For example, in my book, in my autobiography, I went into this degree where I met this guy named Henrik. He was a family friend of my wife at the time, and he was the worst piece of shit white hat I had ever met in my entire life. He was bragging to me about, oh yeah, I'm watching these guys on this website. Here's the website I'm watching. These guys, I know they're up to no good, and all I'm going to do is I'm going to call the FBI, and they're going to get, you know, hit with a search warrant and blah 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 blah. I've got these guys by the balls, ha ha ha. And this guy is doing it for the wrong reasons. Like, so what I end up doing is I contact these guys and let them know, look, dude, shut down your operation. Let it go. Move on. You've got to. This guy was like, he was just a freaking maniac. And just because he wore the white hat collar didn't make him a really decent person. Now, I know a lot of white hats who are wonderful people, and I have nothing bad to say about white hats. But it's just not everybody's cut from the same cloth.
No, and you have to think about it too. Is that, like, black hats? Some black hats don't have motivations, but they get mixed up in an operation or a group of people that have more power over them, or
that's very true.
Blackmail them, and they don't have a choice but to help. And they're always the ones who are hit, you know, with the blame or being a scapegoat, which is really shitty. Yeah. Even government. So
it's so true.
Look at governments, man. So how many black hats work for the government? I can think of at least 20 off the top of my head.
Right.
And they employ them to attack other countries, attack people, break into private networks. you know, it's a game that everybody plays. It's not something that we play. It's a global game, and it always will be.
It is a global game. Everybody has their own intentions, motivations, and whatever circumstances shape them onto that trajectory. So, I mean, yeah, but, you know, everybody always asks me, would you ever help the government? And I would say, my answer is always no, like, no, absolutely not. Like, it's exploitation on a personal level.
Yeah. So my work with the government and being a CI, they really abused me. Fortunately, I didn't have to do CI work against any domestic groups. It was all foreign. But even then, they really make you feel like a servant, like not like a human being. You know, they basically just like
terrible, bro. Run
your shit. And yeah, they may kick you back a couple bucks here and there, but they keep you dependent on them, which is really fucked.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I've seen CIs do some really bad shit to the government, and that may be why they act that way. But I haven't had a good experience with the U.S. government at all. I mean, being overseas and being considered a cyber terrorist and having my passport revoked in a foreign country is pretty fucked up.
Getting worse than that, yeah.
No. So we were watching the guy who stopped, I guess, Eternal Blue. I can't remember the guy's name off the top of my head. He goes by like Bioware Wolf or something like that. But he was in the U.S. and they did the same thing to him. They killed his passport. WannaCry. Yeah, French said WannaCry. So it was on the Hunter Hacker episode on Netflix, I think. But yeah, like they do some really rotten shit to people, especially hackers, you know, and we have no power over that. You know, they throw every agency they have. If they can't get you with like the FBI, they'll go after like the State Department, shut your shit off. They'll throw the IRS at you. They'll ban you from banking. You know, they make you what I call making somebody a zero. Like you don't.
Yeah. Is that pressuring you to do work for them? Is the tactics they take? Is that what you're talking about?
What's that?
Is that the pressure they put on you so that you basically do what they ask, or is this just something they do if you're out of sorts, or what's the?
They do it because they can, right? So when I was a CI with them, I did what they wanted me to do. I provided them the information. I operated in the groups they wanted. I was good and clear until it was election time and the voting in 2016, and I started getting close to what was really going on. And when I got close enough to figure out what was going on, they just kind of cut me loose. And then after that, it was like weird shit started happening. Banks, I can't get a bank account. Hit all the 4S's on flights and the extra screening. And then my passport gets suspended, revoked. So they do what they want in order to keep you from being able to, I guess, gain some foothold to disclose or you know, bring them into the light. The government in the U.S. is like really corrupt. It always has been.
Yeah.
It's not going to change.
So, Ghost, did they ever approach you to work for them, or? Did they ever approach you to work for the government? Like,
absolutely.
They approach us all.
They approach us all. In 2009, I was approached by a Department of Defense recruiter of some kind when I was participating in the DC3 challenge over on DC3.mil. He specifically wanted me to narc on my friends. I wouldn't do it. The only thing that I offered were some of the exploits that we discovered in government websites, just some lame little things here and there. But during my case, they wanted several of my members, and I was looking at 20 years with the possibility of $500,000 in restitution. But I mean, my guidelines wouldn't allow it. But I ended up getting 1 year below the statutory max of what they could give me because I wouldn't tell on my friends.
Yeah.
I'm happy I didn't.
That's pretty common too. Like,
yeah, it is very common.
Yeah, and the way they manipulate it. So when Fidel got arrested, they basically threw like something close to 50 felony charges at him. Unless he became a CI, and he refused. And they were like, okay, well then you go to prison. And they were literally going to try to press the whole, 50 or 44 or whatever it was. And his lawyer was able to fight out on most of it. But still, I mean, they will bury you under the prison because for one, you're a threat because you know more than what they know. You have the ability that they don't have. And so if you don't go to prison, they come to you and say, hey, look, we need some help because our Department of Justice, like technical team is not smart enough to like fight their way out of a paper bag. Which brings me to another point. So Ghost came to us through another member of Anonymous who was part of the Anonymous IRC back in the day, Johnny Five, aka Patrick.
This guy, yeah.
Yeah. So Patrick, tell us about how that happened, man, because I'm curious too.
All right.
Hey.
All right.
Hey, man.
What up? Yeah, so similar to Ghost's story, I grew up with a bunch of little vigilante hackers on, different IRC chat channels, landed me naturally in Anonymous's area, because one day I was hanging out on 4chan, and this is the craziest story. I see this fucking Tom Cruise video being passed around, and I'm thinking like, what the fuck is this? So they're all like, yeah, we're going to go fuck Scientology up over it. And I'm like, okay, sounds like a good idea. I'm like, I know how to hack shit, so let's do this, I hung out in like FNet, different. I mean, I've been all around, man. But I really got going from that point on. I remember watching like DEF CON videos and shit. Who is it? Jeremy Hammond. I remember seeing that video in like 2004. That kind of shit, like it spoke to me. Just the idea of unity and gathering together and just fucking off. I mean, it wasn't like Exodus was saying, it wasn't like it is now. It seems to have evolved into like cyber gangs, whereas I didn't really take it that serious. I mean, I didn't even own a computer until like 2007. I used to go to the library. Right. Yeah. So I spent most of my time up there, logging into different chat rooms and shit like that. And it's like all I researched, was about computer hacking and, different shit. Just tech was my thing. But yeah, back to Anonymous. So from there on out, I watched some shit go down. A lot of people went down. It got crazy. People went in different directions. I did myself. I later resurfaced, after 2012, after a lot of the arrests like Barrett Brown and some of the other key characters like Sabu. We all heard about it, and naturally I boogied out. I came back because of like operations like Ferguson and stuff like that. There was some other critical ops that I wanted to make sure I was involved with. So from there on out, I mean, yeah, it's just it ended as soon as it began, pretty much. Last year, I made a decision, to just take a step down and try to be. Yeah,
that's the hardest part is walking away from that and like giving up those connections.
Mm-hmm. Yes. It's not like I gave up any connections. It's just when shit's going on, you just kind of stay out of it and let them do their thing. Yeah. Everybody that knows me knows, I was pretty much nothing short of a tactical nuke when it came to hacktivism. But it's been interesting, coming up, and now I'm just looking forward to. And that's another thing about me that I don't think a lot of people understand. I was an IT professional. I'm a former IT manager, so it wasn't all just me jumping online to fuck computers up. I actually worked in the industry. Hopefully my former employers don't look any further down on me. I just thought what I was doing was right and made sense.
So and that brings me back to our group, right? So this group started out as like simply a podcast, and just like a bunch of us getting together and like, you know, talking about bullshit. And all of a sudden it's become like this thing. And I've been interviewed about, you know, tell me about your movement. And I'm like, whoa, that's like too familiar. Like, this is some weird shit. Like, not like we thought about this and planned it out. Like, hey, this is what we're going to do. We're going to stand for this. We're going to stand for that. It was more of a podcast, and all of a sudden it became a movement. But I think it lends to the environment, and people just want some kind of truth and transparency and like some kind of level of people being genuine, right? And the same thing, like, you know, when I told you about, you know, how it felt with this group and how it felt with Anonymous when we first starting out, it's the same tone, it's the same vibe, same type of environment. You know, back then we had post 9/11, we had the, you know, the Iraq War, all that good stuff, right? And we were bouncing back from that, but the government was like intruding on everything. So some time went by, things were chill, you know, they got past that, and then all of a sudden this. And then now this group is coming back together again. It's really
funny
strange.
too, because I think, what was it, 2002 or something like that. I remember when the Matrix came out, and I was thinking to myself, I'm like, man, I want to fucking hack computers like that, you know? I'm thinking like, that shit is fucking cool, you know? I'm like, where do I sign up? I'm like, where, you know? So I would, like I said, I would always go to the library. It was the only place where computers were in that time, you know? They weren't like a household item. I mean, and they were fucking expensive, you know? So it's been interesting, man. It's evolved. I think that the direction where IT and IT security is going, you know, it's got so many dynamics to it now. It's amazing to see, you know, how it evolved, you know, from something, you know, from our day, you know, when it's crazy, man. I mean, and then you're looking at the cert list, and I was like, wow, like, where do I start?
Dude, the cert list, the certs are its own industry within itself. And they've hijacked everybody's talent and said, okay, you know, this is a standard. You got to pay us $10,000 and, you know, go to this 5-day boot camp and take this bullshit test. And all of a sudden you're qualified to be like the defense of some company. I fight against that because, you know, if you're going to hire someone based on 3 letters behind their name, then I don't want to work for you. And when I interviewed people, like I put together what I call a gauntlet, right? I put together a virtual box environment with multiple machines, multiple vulnerabilities to say, hey, look, you got a day, go for it. Show me what you can find, break into it, write me a report, and present that report to me. I don't care about certs. You know, certs may get you into government contracts, but what does it really say besides the fact you can take a test?
That's an interesting story. Somebody hired me out there one time, and he, I told him he was like, I forgot what he said, but he's like, I want the guy on his way to jail, and I'm like, what? I'm like, I don't want to be on my way to fucking jail, man. You know, and it made me laugh because he was actually giving me, you know, credibility in a way. You know, he was saying like, you know, you're good at what you do. So, you know, if I'm going to hire you for a contract, he's like, he knew what I was doing, you know. So.
Yeah, but they're creating that environment, right? So the more they rely on certs, they're creating an environment where they're putting separation between people who really know what they're doing and people who want to know what they're doing. And you're not going to get that quality unless you look at somebody like us who have been on that way to jail or past jail. Because what you're going to get is academia, somebody who can read a book and take a test.
I think all 3 of us can agree that there's a difference when you're doing it illegally than when you're not. You know, it's like most of the systems that I've gone after, you know, I didn't even know anything about them. You know, it was just, you know, like red light, go.
totally black box, right? But what was cool is when I was working with one of the financial giants in the U.S. During Occupy Wall Street.
Wow, that was interesting.
Leaking their shit to anonymous databases, mortgages, fraud, and doing that during, like, collecting that data during the day while I was working as a trusted, you know, employee in threat management in their company, in a major company, and at night dumping that shit in the channels. You know, it's like, how much do they really know? So now those financial institutions and other organizations are hiring people to, like, look at the individuals within a company, the insider threat. Insider threat wasn't a thing before like 9/11, before 2001. But now they're like, oh shit, we're giving these people access, and these people are walking off with data and cost us millions of dollars. So it looks like, to me, the industry moves and changes along with what we do. Like the three of us, like the type of people we are, the industry kind of follows what we do and kind of molds to stop people like us. But what they don't understand is like we're very unpredictable. And a lot of the companies put together these algorithms based on behaviors and based on past experience, but those algorithms never work.
David and Sam, that's one thing that I never did was hack from home, right?
Right.
So I mean, I probably spent a lot of real estate at Starbucks, and I'm not going to even lie.
Thank you so much.
But I feel bad because like I probably abused the shit out of Starbucks Wi-Fi for probably 5 years.
Look at Home Depot, right? The guys
the feds do it. I mean, what the
fuck? So look at Home Depot and the guys who hacked those hundreds of credit card numbers and took millions of dollars from Home Depot, did it from their parking lot, and hacked into their Wi-Fi, which we're going to do some Wi-Fi hacking later, but there's a lot of simple stuff out there that people don't understand. Like, there's RF. I was talking to Ghost about, RF and the shit that exists as far as like, what you can obtain and what you can mimic. And then Wi-Fi is so simple, and especially with everybody on lockdown and working from home, like Wi-Fi is like the shit now. Like it went from being, I'm not really concerned about the next door neighbor's Wi-Fi to, I know they're working from home and their Wi-Fi shit. So let's see what we can get. Not saying I did that, but it's very probable that happens around the world.
That's funny too, because I always tell young hackers this story and shit. It was like 2009 and I just got into college, and I was broke, obviously, a college student. And that's how I got through like almost like 6 months of my first like semesters was I hacked into the neighbor's Wi-Fi, and it was just, I don't know, it was just naturally something that I did. My aunt gave me a laptop, I remember that, and she's like, make sure you keep your shit together. And she's like, don't be hacking into nobody's shit, because she knew I was good, like she just, I don't know. I'm thankful that somebody pushed me in a right direction, even though I was doing stupid shit on the internet. I still, managed to walk somewhere.
All right, welcome back, everybody. In today's segment, Something Old segment, we have a previous episode of the DevOps Unbound series, talking with Sean Kelly of Tricentis, Paul Pinkney of Swiss Log Healthcare, and Paula Goyanis of LaunchDarkly talked to Alan about accessibility and usability in design in DevOps. Great conversation, so let's give it a listen.
Hey, everyone. Welcome to another edition of DevOps Unbound. Of course, after our opening kind of credit, I'm always looking to go vroom, vroom. But we are ready to vroom, vroom today. We're ready to speed right into what I think is going to be a great discussion. And it's a discussion we could have at any time, but through the lens of DevOps, Agile, Lean, and what goes on in today's development cycles and world, I think it's even more important. We're going to be discussing today usability and accessibility, and how DevOps and similar or aligned technologies are changing it, influencing it, how it's being done from a professional point of view. Speaking of professional, I'm really happy to introduce you to our panel this week. We have an amazing panel. First of all, actually a man I used to work with probably more years ago than he wants to admit. Paul Pickney is with us. Paul, welcome to DevOps Unbound.
Oh, thank you for having me.
Why don't you share a little background with our audience?
I'm a lead designer, user experience designer at a company called Swisslog Healthcare. I have done user experience since before user experience was even a term, including a lot of accessibility stuff, including at Dish Network. I got their Dish Hopper accessible. I worked on accessibility for a network security company and a few other telecoms before that. And currently trying to get us up to speed at my company now.
Excellent. Joining Paul and I is Paula from LaunchDarkly. And again, Paula, I don't want to mangle your last name, but it's Goyanis?
Goyanis, that's right.
Goyanis, okay. Introduce yourself to the audience.
Hi, I'm Paula Goyanis. I'm a software engineer at LaunchDarkly. I've been working at LaunchDarkly for a couple of years, but even before I was a software engineer, I've been really interested in web accessibility and just like the inclusion of all people in the web. And I've been advocating really hard at LaunchDarkly for accessibility for a long time now.
Fantastic.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you. Third member of our panel today is Sean Kelly. Sean, welcome.
Thank you for having me.
My pleasure.
My name is Sean Kelly. I'm the VP of User Experience at Tricentis. I've been there a whole whopping 3 months. So we're just getting, we're formalizing our accessibility plans for software plans. And before that, I actually started off in aerospace. So doing accessibility and usability for bombers and fighter jets for about 5 years, then transitioned to healthcare for another, I think, 11 years. So it's really interesting to see how the common themes across different industries actually, how they play out in different circumstances.
Sure is. That is interesting. And then last but not least is my co-host here on DevOps Unbound. He's the co-founder or the founder and CEO of Accelerated Strategies Group. He was my co-founder at previous companies, Mitch Ashley. Hey, Mitchell, welcome.
Hey, it's good to be with you. I just want to say, unlike our other panelists, I am not a user experience designer, though I've worked with 3 fabulous designers and teams starting in the 90s with Josh Stoller and Monica Merricks, and then with Paul Pinkney. So learned a ton from folks like Paul and others and our whole panel.
But you are a user.
I am a user and I do have an experience.
Yes. Okay. There you go then. That qualifies you for this. So guys, first of all, thank you all for joining us. Let's jump into it. So I think, the idea of user accessibility, and I'm blanking right now on the very first sort of, was it 508? What was the number for when we first started saying that websites needed to be accessible for people with limited vision and other sort of handicaps? It wasn't a 508. That's a nonprofit company. But go
ahead.
I think what you may be thinking of is Section 508.
Yes.
For government websites is the thing that says that in the United States, websites have to be accessible.
So that goes back probably 20 years, I'm going to bet, or 15, 18 years. And I think for many of us, that was the stake in the ground, if you will, for accessibility. But of course, I think our expectations around accessibility and our consumers' expectations around accessibility have changed drastically since Section 508 all those years ago. You guys are experts. I'm going to let you. Who wants to give us a brief history of accessibility time?
I guess I could start off with that. Actually, it's interesting in the military world. It actually goes back a little bit further than 20 years ago, starting with Military Standard 1472, which basically outlined how cockpit design should be, including a little bit of display. So more hardware based, and then that led to Section 508 and W3C standards. It's interesting though. I've seen like over the past 20 years, it's kind of accessibility went from a checklist, right? Like check the boxes, make sure you do that, more towards a business imperative. We should do this to be better than the competition. And now it's kind of table stakes. So the users actually kind of expect usability as like a baseline, right? It's not enough just to have it anymore. It's become an expectation across a lot of different industries. So that's actually really good to hear, right? Because if users expect that, that means we are forced to make our products more accessible. And it's really interesting to see the evolution of that over time.
I'll just add a little bit. Oh, go ahead.
No, I was going to say, please join in.
Sure, I'll just add on to that. One of the things I noticed, especially when Section 508 first came out, is it was very technical. There were a lot of requirements about how you tag things like tables and things like that. And it was just very, very much on the development side. And a lot of those some of those have actually relaxed a little bit in favor of things to design on the front end more. So it's gone from much less on the technical side, even though there are additional technical requirements now, but some of those have actually kind of gone away because they found out they weren't really all that useful and they were really difficult to do in favor of more on the design side. The other thing is, I don't know if people are aware of CVAA, which is the Consumer Video Accessibility Act. And they were falling kind of behind the web world. So things like set-top boxes from Dish and other companies like that, DirecTV, they had to kind of get caught up. And it wasn't until about 5 or 6 years ago, I think, when we really, all of a sudden out of nowhere, it felt like out of nowhere, we were kind of behind the 8 ball. We had to get all the set-top boxes up to date. Because one of the things I noticed when I first started at Dish is they were relying on these colored buttons on the remote control. Well, 3 of them are red, yellow, and green. So already you're way behind the 8 ball with that all by itself. So we had to redesign our remote control. Then we had to add text to audio or text to speech and audio description and even things like Bluetooth audio so people could put in hearing aids and obviously closed captioning and things like that. So just wanted to throw that in as well.
Absolutely. Paula, you want to comment?
Yeah, I wanted to mention, since we're kind of talking about the law, in terms of the law, the other thing in the United States that really upholds web accessibility is the Americans with Disabilities Act. The ADA has been the thing cited in a bunch of these lawsuits. And Section 508 was amended, I think in like the late 90s, like 1998, I want to say something like that. But really, we've been leaning a lot on the ADA since it's like accommodation of public spaces for like non-government websites, for example, to be able to actually file those lawsuits. Like erudite and philosopher Beyonce was actually sued not too long ago for having an inaccessible website. So,
really?
Anybody is open to it. The Domino's lawsuit was a big deal maybe a year or two ago. So yeah, and that's just the United States. Web accessibility, I think Canada has like very robust laws around web accessibility. So it's not just here in the US.
What about EU? Is there any specific EU kind of regulations to worry about here?
I'm sure there are, although I can't I remember acronyms off the top of my head here. But yeah, I'm sure, listen, if it's in the US and it's in Canada, it's in the EU.
Interesting.
One of the things I was going to jump in with, Alan, is that when I was experienced this, kind of exposed to user experience and accessibility, there's a lot of focus around visual impairments, of course, and ways to design applications. And of course, we have hearing and ability to input and speech to text and text to speech and all those kinds of things. So it's all of those things individually, but it's also collectively, because oftentimes you may have someone who have more than one disability. So it's a challenging field, but it's also, I think, a very rewarding field from the people that I talk with, because you are literally helping people, in how they interface with the world, at least through computers, softwares, hardware, et cetera.
That actually is a really good story from my healthcare days too. So you mentioned multiple disabilities and so forth and designing for that. So I worked on the Kaiser Permanente website. That was my main focus. This is back in like late to mid 2000s. And we had to design a care facility website for neuropsychiatric patients that were going through rehabilitation and so forth. So we really had to make it accessible for people that had traumatic brain injuries. And that was probably the hardest design challenge I've ever had to do in my life, right? There's no standard for that. You really have to talk to people that have brain injuries and figure out, okay, how do I take this really dense, complicated medical information and distill it down in a way that's going to make sense for people that don't have, memory that works like most people do. So that was through a lot of user testing, and it was probably one of the most rewarding projects I've ever done as well, just because it was so, we kind of brought, more people to the table of using that product that were previously shut out before. And that's such a rewarding feeling. I'm pretty sure people on the panel also have stories like that too.
I mean, and that is a great thing. I think it also brings up, Sean, something that we need to hit on. When I first became aware of Section 508 and designing websites, it was really about visual impairment, right? You had to assume, if someone had a visual impairment, was that website usable? Even if it was a relatively minor one like color blindness, and they couldn't tell red, green, or what have you, right? When so many buttons were red, stop, green, go, and stuff like that. But when we talk about accessibility, I'd like to think, have evolved since 25 years ago. And it's more than just visual impairments, right? Sean mentioned cognitive kind of impairments. Paul, I'm, at Dish, I'm sure was a lot of visual, and Paula, what other kind of impairments do we try to design around or design for with our accessibility solutions today?
Yeah, in the W3C website, there's actually a list of all kinds of impairments. So there's cognitive, neurological, mobile impairments, as well as visual impairments, hearing impairments. But I think something really important to note about accessibility is that it benefits everyone. And it's not just permanent disabilities. There are also temporary limitations, like I've got a baby in one arm, so I'm typing with one hand, or the light is really bright coming out through my window, or I am hungover. 2020 has been very hard on all of us. I'm not hungover right now, though. All of those are temporary limitations.
I'm gonna take your word for it.
and all of those kind of what benefits those situations, those temporary limitations, are what benefits people with disabilities as well. And I think something really interesting to note is that, yes, like we are building and designing for people with, neurological impairments, people with visual impairments, but really, I think it's important for the framing to be not, I'm designing for this person with a visual impairment, it's I'm designing for this user flow, or like this, being able to accomplish this goal, regardless of what your disability might be.
And I think that's an important piece of it too. It's not just how do I make this website better for people who have X, Y kind of impairment. It's about what do we want people to accomplish, right?
Yeah, I'll add to that and say I totally agree. And the other thing is, one of the things you find that when you do a lot of these, you design for accessibility, it's good for everybody. It's not just anybody with particular impairments or anything like that. You're bumping up the usability for literally everybody in most cases. The other thing I'd mention, you wanted to talk about other kinds of disabilities. The interesting thing at Dish was, for example, designing for blind people. One of the things people didn't realize, blind people watch TV and they call it watching TV. And so you need to provide those facilities so they can actually interpret what's going on with the show, because it's a very social thing. They get with all their friends, including a lot of blind friends, and they talk about these things, what's going on with this show and that sort of thing. So that's something that I'm not sure people have considered.
Now, there's also the universal impairment we all have, which is setting the clock on your VCR. I don't think that's been solved yet. Just throwing in a little bit.
You're showing your age. I don't know how many of these people have VCRs anymore.
It's a 3-letter acronym. I thought
yeah,
we'll use it.
Yeah, it's what they used to tape stuff on. But you just setting your clock on any appliance can be a challenge.
Hey, my cassette deck here. What are you talking about?
Yeah, 8-track tapes. But anyway, but no, I mean, these are all really great and valid points in that we need to do that. But, there's another aspect, talking about the user. So for instance, if you use an iPhone, and I'm sure it's probably like this on Android too, there's a whole section in the configuration settings on iPhone, accessibility, where you can have better contrast, change the fonts, make more sound notifications or less, or what have you. And I'm going to tell you, you know, true confession time here. I was hesitant to enable some of those applications that would enhance my usability, my user experience, the same way I was hesitant to take the discount at the movie theater, you know, when they said, oh, you qualify for a senior discount. And I said, oh, you know, and I said, I'll take the money, fine, give me the discount. But, you know, or getting that AARP card on the day of your 50th birthday. So you know, how much does that play into it, where some users don't want to take advantage of what we're doing around accessibility to make it easier for them? I mean, how do you design that into the equation? Sean?
Well, yeah, I think it's kind of like what Paula said. It's just if you design it, you just kind of bake it into the design solution, right? So it's not like a separate design solution. You use the use case and just make it accessible for everyone. So for example, contrast ratios, right? I think most people, I don't know, it's been a long time, but most people in their early 20s can probably look at those little tiny icons on the iPhone, for example, and make sense of it. But I mean, I can't, right? I'm 42 and I would not personally, just out of sheer, I don't know, ego preservation, would not go into the settings to change the contrast ratio for my icons, right? But I think if you just make that one solution for everybody, it just kind of works and you don't have to think about it. And I think, you know, except in very limited cases, that's the right solution to go with.
But Apple's the maven of design, right? We all, you know, look to Apple, but yet they have this. They've done that. So are you saying they poor design on their part?
No. I mean, so they have kind of two levels of accessibility, right? The levels of accessibility they kind of bake in that's going to hit a lot of people. Then there's like the super set where you might need a little extra. So it's funny because they have the accessibility settings, but with the regular designs, it's already built in and you don't even see it or you don't think about it.
Paul, interested in, you know, in your dish experience, so do we make accessibility an option, or as Sean says, it's just built in, there is no option?
It depended on what it was. Like, for example, you don't want text to speech on by default. That's just going to really annoy people. And you know, I think we've seen this on like DVDs and Blu-rays where they automatically turn on all this stuff, and so most people don't want closed captioning on by default, so they wind up having to go back and turn it off. It's just weird. There's only a handful that seem to have done that, but I'm trying to remember the other things we have to do. But certainly the color blindness thing was a big thing, and basically when we took care of anybody with any kind of CVD or color vision deficiency, it actually was easier for people to even just look at a remote and see a symbol rather than a color and that sort of thing. The other thing we did is for example, we decided when you pick up the remote, maybe one of the automatic things we did is the keyboard lights up right on the remote control. Guess what? That wasn't just for people with vision problems. That was, everybody really loved that one because a lot of people watch TV in the dark. So
yeah, no, I appreciate that on my iPad.
Think about voice control. I mean, there are things that are sold as features, right? And voice control that are built into remote controls and different electronics. That's you know, a big feature that are advertised by the cable companies and others. So, and of course, that improves accessibility too.
Yeah, guys, I got a couple of different angles here that I want us to go hit on. Let's turn from accessibility on its own now, as it relates to primarily people who have challenges, to usability, which is closely aligned with it, but is maybe a little bit broader in our scope, right? And all three of you, you know, designing and interfaces and so forth, what would have been some of the big breakthroughs you think we've made around usability that have enabled this world we live in where everything's an app. And it's, what amazes me is 3-year-olds can figure apps out like this. People who get a little older kind of struggle. And there must be something about usability, a lesson there somewhere. But what do you think on that, Paula? Why don't you kick off?
Yeah, I think there's been an adoption of universal design, where it's kind of to the point that Sean and Paul were making previously, which is like, making sure that you design with like inclusion in mind from the get-go. And then you can have like a second layer of accessibility, if you have like special like needs just above what is already there. I mean, this is the equivalent of like in the real world, having like at the front of a building, like a really nice ramp kind of along a set of stairs, it looks very beautiful, as opposed to having like some janky ramp at the back of the building, where you can't like just access it like everybody else does if you have a different need. So I think that first example, right, in the real world is more like universal design. And I think there's been a breakthrough in making sure that our apps are kind of starting with universal design. And that's going to improve usability, right? Because accessibility benefits everybody, and anything that is accessible is probably going to improve usability. I think also just like, having to use touch screens and the fact that technology kind of permeates every aspect of our lives, and maybe we're using technology while we're driving, for example, or like while we are distracted, while we are pushing a grocery cart with one hand, has really pushed us to like design and build, really usable things, even in limited situations.
Fair enough. Paul?
Yeah, one thing I'll add to that is, and I agree with that, is we've gone forward in a lot of respects, and I also feel like we've gone backward. And the reason I say that is, for example, when you talk about kids being able to get on an iPad and figure it out, it's because they're willing to explore. They're very playful. They like to explore things. They find things. Whereas you have somebody who's not quite so, shall we say, technologically brave, like say my mother, the affordances aren't there. So she doesn't know how to get to certain things, because you have to do a lot of discovery sometimes to use something like an iPad. So we got to be a little bit cognizant of that. I think the lack of affordance in a lot of features is something we need to make sure we work on a little bit, because some of these devices, for people who are a little bit scared of technology, are very difficult actually to use. But in terms of things like touch targets, for example, I think touchscreens have helped us with even desktop web applications, for example, because we're looking at things like, I forget if it's Hicks or Fitt's law, where basically the ability to and the speed with which you can actually click on a control has to do with its size and the distance you are from that thing. And touchscreens have taught us a lot about, let's make things big. Don't make these little bitty text pieces that we used to do that you could click on nicely with a mouse, because a mouse gives you a lot of control. Instead, let's make these nice big targets, and that helps everybody.
Yep. Sean, any thoughts on that?
Well, they did a pretty good job. I had a list of things I was going to mention, and I think about more than half of them got checked off as they were talking. So definitely, I think one thing that's also helped out too, about a couple more things, voice controls as well, because that kind of forces people to make the interactions as simple as possible. And that kind of carries over from voice design into actual physical screen design, for example. The other thing too, it's a little bit meta, but it's also the broadening of what we mean by user experience. So I think, I've seen it kind of be more expansive, right? Where before we just considered the in-product experience itself, right? And I think now we're looking at experience in a broader sense, where it's, what's the person's ecosystem? What is their environment? How are they learning this? So for example, and I'm sure Paula can speak to this being a software engineer, it is harder than hell to learn a new programming language if you don't have the right basis for it, right? And no matter how easy the tool is to use, for example, like a software tool, like in the tech space, no matter how usable it is, if you don't have that foundational knowledge, it's going to be completely difficult. So I think we've seen the definition expand to include things like learning or helping people understand not just how to use the product, but educating them about the discipline as well. And I mean, I'm kind of jealous of people that are coming out of school now learning programming, because there's a lot of like online tutorials, there's a lot of in-product support to learn things, and a lot of community forums. That's part of the broader definition of experience. I think that's really helped improve usability of the products as well.
Sure. Right.
You know, one of the big advances I want to add to this conversation is, again, I'll show my age. I can remember the day of wireframes just printed on paper. Simulated mouse pointer manipulated by a pencil or something to simulate a design. Think about the tools that we have today that designers can use to build a complete graphical interface, sometimes even simulating full application or most of the application functionality to do usability testing, but also to experiment and make rapid changes. So the tool set, the technology to embody the design is so much better than even, I would say, even 10 years ago. You think about it in the Xcode development environment, what the UI simulation tools were, very basic Mac app or an app for a phone. Now it's, okay, I want to see this on every model of every phone, on watches and on my webpage. You can do that from a design tool. Again, not just about accessibility, there's a lot of other capabilities, but it's a great environment to work in. I'm kind of like Sean says, what a great place to start if you're getting in the industry now.
Yeah.
That brings up a very good point, actually, too. I think more than anything, it's also, we don't have to sell user testing anymore. Well, not as much anyway. Where before, I remember I had to fight.
Careful, Sean. I know you're only there 3 months, but I will give you a hint. In Tricentis, do never say you don't have to sell testing. Just kidding.
Let me rephrase that.
Yeah.
So for user testing, right, we can put our prototypes in front of users a lot quicker because of the tooling and because of broader organizational support for testing. And yeah, you can just test a lot more people a lot faster with the new tools and so forth. And I think our testing methods have actually evolved over time as well. So I think that's also, because that rapid feedback from our users before production, we get a lot, we get so much rich data from that.
That kind of brings me into where I want to, okay, go ahead, Paul, I'll jump in after you, go ahead.
Oh, that's okay. Yeah, I don't know if you and Mitch, I'm sure Mitch remembers this, but one of the things I wound up doing back at that network security company we worked for, was putting together click-through prototypes, because there was really no other way to actually show people how the actual interaction design works. Before that, it was just sort of, you know, it's just wireframe by wireframe, or, you know, even a hi-fi sort of screenshot or design, that sort of thing. You really never got a feeling for the interaction design. So I wound up writing, you know, a ton of JavaScript so I could actually show people how the interaction works, not just, and I could actually usability test right off that before it ever went into development. And now we have things like Figma and Envision and stuff, which are absolutely wonderful. But it took a lot of work back then to, you know, get those actually interactive.
I remember that.
I do too.
Yeah. So let's talk a little bit about, though, you know, accessibility and usability in the age of DevOps, which is, you know, we're DevOps Unbound here, right? And so, I mean, there's good and bad. I think, Sean, you nailed it. The good is, hey man, we're doing usability and accessibility testing pre-deployment as part of our design, which is a lot better than feedback loops, but, you know, going back to go every time, right? But on the other hand, when you're changing your application and potentially your UI, making little changes, even if they're just little changes, 10 times a day or 100 times a day, sometimes what was fixed can get broken. Or, you know, you could do I call it the DevOps cha-cha, 1 step back, 2 steps forward, 1 step back. And you know, how do we do that? How do we account for that in our usability and you know, design in a DevOps world like that? Paula?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's really important to start having an accessible site really early on, right? So like at the beginning of your site, like the beginning of your company, if you invest in accessibility, you can really avoid these mistakes. The reason being that like all of the code examples from before will already have been accessible. The reason being that like the design systems that you put in place will already be accessible. And so when you design something new and you iterate on it, like you're taking design elements that are already accessible, right? Like really investing at the beginning is, I think, the best way to really kind of fight against this.
Paul or Sean? Or
yeah,
Rich?
I wholeheartedly agree to that. And I think the best way to design, to invest up front is to make it into your design pattern library. So basically it's kind of creating that common set of reusable components, code components and design components. And hopefully most of the design changes are just rearranging those components or those Lego bricks, right? But if each brick has accessibility baked into it, that doesn't break the code in terms of accessibility. So I think that's probably the best way to solve it. It's also probably one of the most difficult, and just because you have to do that up front, right? You have to do that. You have to make your design pattern library up front. You have to maintain that code base. But once you actually have that set up, it just makes development so much faster anyway. So it's actually a win-win for everybody, for accessibility and for developers.
Mitchell, Paul, anything?
Yeah, one thing, I'm relatively new to my company as well, so I'm trying to introduce quite a bit, including we're creating our own design system right now. But one of the things I want to introduce, and I don't have any results of this, but I really want to educate our testers, our QA people, very much on how to test a site or a product for accessibility. Doing things without, with just a keyboard and putting your mouse away and those sorts of things. So I think if we do a lot more of that and they kind of do regression testing in that way, at least once in a while, we can ensure accessibility quite a bit more as well.
Sure. Yeah, that is a good point. And that does bring me to another point, which is you can also kind of bake it into your development process in terms of linting. So there's a lot of really great linters out there. For example, for JSX, there's JSX-A11Y. And if you don't know, accessibility is often abbreviated as A11Y. And so that'll stop you from making mistakes early on. And to Paul's point about testing, yeah, accessibility can actually be baked into like your testing process. Your end-to-end tests, can run after you push to your master or primary branch, and they can test accessibility as well. There's a lot of tools out there for making that possible. For example, PA11Y can help you do that. You can then go ahead and monitor that in something like Datadog. So similar to how you monitor other things that can break in your code, you can monitor accessibility and consider it a regression or a bug when something breaks and catch that before you go to production.
One of the things I'm curious about is the acceptance of usability design, usability testing by the developer community, DevOps community. How much has that improved? Is it now, security people struggle with, okay, let's shift left and get security built into the application more, but you've been at this a lot longer. What's the acceptance like now by software teams and people leading development?
My experience is it varies a lot. It depends on the particular personnel involved. One of the things I found that's really helped is in the design system I'm putting together, I put a lot of rationale in there. I don't just give people specs and say, follow this. I don't take any kind of draconian approach to any of it. In fact, I want a lot of feedback, and I've baked in, I put a lot of their feedback, including from engineers, back into the design system itself. But explaining the rationale of why are we doing things this way, and even if they don't fully, even if they don't fully read the site and go through it in detail, giving presentations about here's why we do the things we do. And I can tell you a lot of engineers really appreciate that. They love, or developers, they love knowing why they're going through the pains of doing some of these things. And they see the rationale, and then they see it developed, and they see that, oh yeah, this is so much easier to use. And I've seen a lot of that. There are others who are a little more resistant to such things. It's just a little bit individual in that respect.
Absolutely. Hey, Sean, I'm going to put you on the spot.
Oh no, okay.
We know you're only there 3 months, but talk to us. What does Tricentis have built into their testing, solutions for accessibility, usability testing. Is that something Tricentis plays in? Or are you dealing more with how to build that into the actual Tricentis products?
So yeah, so my vantage point is more of how to build it into the product. So we're looking at ways to kind of standardize our look and feel in our UI, right? And as part of that, even before we start making the very first sketch file to represent what those components look like, we need to bake in what the accessibility requirements are. So I'm looking at it from that perspective.
Got it. So guys, we haven't really mentioned COVID much, right? And we can't do it's always the elephant in the room in 2020. How has the pandemic, people working from home, everything that comes out of this nightmare of a situation, how has that had any effect on usability, accessibility at all?
Oh, from my standpoint, it's helped. This is the one silver lining of this whole storm of COVID. It's I think it's just making people more inherently empathetic because they've been experiencing the pain of remote tools not being up to snuff, for example. And I think that it's giving people a different mindset for others. And it's exposed a lot of holes in like our the way that we think about things, right? And that's forced people to think about others in a way that they haven't before. So I've noticed there's actually been a lot more enthusiasm, a lot more support, and a lot more proactive discussion about accessibility and inclusive design, for that matter, because of COVID.
Absolutely. Paul, any thoughts?
I think that's a great point. I think to add to that, I think a lot of people are doing things online that they were doing in person before. Like I know my grandparents are shopping online when they would shop in person before. And I don't have any data to actually support this, but I imagine that that's definitely driven the desire to have accessible websites.
In a sense, we've been sort of lucky in that we're a global company. So we do so much work together online that I feel very fortunate that I work for this company because the transition has actually been relatively simple. It's for most of us, it's actually helped because we just get so much more work done. But we already had so many tools in place for working with each other, but we're even discovering more. Like I'm putting together a thing called a feedback workshop where you have online Post-it notes, and while you're giving a design presentation, everybody just sort of stays quiet and they write down their notes, and then we sort of put them into buckets and we talk about them later. And we actually get through design reviews much more quickly, and it's mainly because we're not doing these things in person. We've never thought about doing it this way.
Yeah, no, I get it. Last subject, because we're running low on time. My experience, and I've been in the technology business 30 years, is that a lot of times things like accessibility, usability, quite frankly, even security, are not afterthoughts, but bolted on after the fact. They're not built into that design from the get-go. And we're in an age now where we're seeing, like, for instance, Kubernetes cloud native infrastructure, right, for deployments really kind of be the de facto standard. But it's always my experience that deployment tools for Kubernetes, or whatever the latest greatest fad or trends are, it takes a little while for accessibility, usability to catch up to those latest and greatest things. Are we, because of some of the stuff we've spoken about here today, will we avoid that pitfall with the latest crop of technologies that we're using, right? So has accessibility, usability become so mainstream that we build it in from the get-go? Sean, that's a big part of your mission, I bet, at Tricentis. What do you think?
It really is, and not to oversell it, but I think that a lot of successful companies are building it in right where it's expected. And I've seen a lot of companies that haven't done that take that old approach to kind of bolting it on right. I've seen them kind of fall by the wayside. So just through kind of like the process of natural selection and how companies evolve and how they grow revenue over time, the companies that do actually build it in are the successful ones. So I think,
No, that's fair. Paul, go ahead.
I totally agree with that. And I just to add to that, I just think the marketplace now is one where people expect it. It's no longer a desire to have usability and user experience built in. It's an expectation. And if you don't build it in, especially right away, you're very likely to fail.
Actually, Paul, I'm trying to do something else too. It's like, I know that whenever I interview new designers, for example, right, I think what we're seeing as well is that a lot of people, a lot of designers especially, are really socially conscious, right? And just nuts and bolts trying to recruit for new talent and so forth. If you don't have accessibility baked into your process or you don't have a position on it, it is really hard to recruit design talent because of it. So, I mean, I'm not saying that's the reason to do accessibility, but definitely if you don't do it, that's one of the benefits of, or that's one of the drawbacks of not having it, is that you can't recruit the talent needed to make the great designs of your products in the first place.
Excellent. Paula?
Yeah, no, I agree with all of that. I'm not sure whether or not the new crop of technology will necessarily mean that it'll be accessible from the get-go. There's still a lot of barriers to this. It's not invested in. I think we're starting to understand why we should invest in accessibility more. But there's still an overwhelming percentage of the internet which is not accessible, unfortunately. But yeah, I mean, I do think there is a trend towards more accessible, and like Paul said, right, a lot of people are much more socially conscious now, and that definitely helps. And to Sean's point, it's important to hire, like, a lot of people who are getting hired nowadays care about accessibility. So yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah,
hey, Mitchell, you want to take I was going to say take the last word here.
Going to jump in and say there's one universal skill every software user has, and that's to sniff out bad software. And we live in a world of choice. We have tons of choices. Think about all the apps for your phone, on your phone. It's no longer it's Word for word processing, right, or for documents. You have tons of choices, and people have options. And I think that that's not something that the business side of the house understands of why great design. It's not just good design, it's great design. People choose and build loyalty with companies like Apple because they have such loyalty to their design standards and the accessibility, usability of their products. They really like that. And that can be a major differentiator. I also want to share one other thought, kind of a future thing to think about, that I'm concerned about, that we don't understand much yet about COVID, and that's the impact, the neurological impact to individuals, because there apparently is some residual impact to some people who have COVID. And that may be with us for a long time. We don't know if it's temporary or if it's the longevity of it. But we could have a society of large numbers of people that have some level of impact from that. And that could be a lasting impact of COVID that we need to design more effectively for those kinds of situations for end users. Let's hope not. But if it is, I think it's something we have to take extremely seriously.
Agreed. Listen, Sean, Paul, Paula, thanks for joining Mitchell and I on this episode of DevOps Unbound. I think it's been a great discussion around usability and accessibility. We're going to revisit it again in the future, and we'd love for you to come join us. But we're going to have to call an end to this DevOps Unbound episode. Thank you all for watching. We hope you enjoyed it. DevOps Unbound, past episodes, our monthly roundtables, even the audio-only podcast versions of these are all available at devopsunbound.com. So you can go there to see the whole collection and take your pick of which ones you'd like to experience. Guys, thanks very much. This is Alan Schimmel for DevOps Unbound. Many thanks to Tricentis for sponsoring our DevOps Unbound series. We'll be back. Actually, we have a great roundtable coming up, Mitchell, this month.
We do.
And we have another show we'll be on in 2 weeks. Thanks very much, everyone. Have a great day.
Hey, everybody. Happy Monday. This is Charlene O'Hanlon. I'm here now with the headlines for you. First up on DevOps.com, we have an article that looks at migrating legacy applications to the cloud. You know, we're about 10 years or so since the cloud started coming into vogue as an alternative to or a complement to on-premises infrastructures and applications. As that has become ubiquitous, though, issues have emerged regarding the migration of legacy applications into cloud environments. It's still not an easy task, but this article offers up 4 ways that organizations can tackle the challenge of migrating these workloads to the cloud, including the pros and cons of each strategy. For organizations grappling with the best way to shift legacy apps into the cloud, perhaps as part of their digital transformation strategies, this article is definitely one worth checking out. Also, as part of our January topic spotlight on enterprise digital transformation, we have the video and audio transcript on the site of a recent panel discussion that I conducted with 3 DevOps Institute ambassadors. Our conversation aired right here on TechStrong TV last week, and we covered a number of topics related to enterprise digital transformation. Everything from the pandemic's impact on digital transformation to some tips to help organizations that are just starting their transformational journeys succeed. It was an insightful conversation and one that offers a number of takeaways, so please give it a listen if you get a chance. In news, OpsRamp announced its AIOps platform that now has the ability to analyze network flows and communications traffic. The new analytics capabilities will make it possible for IT teams to correlate the IT events that OpsRamp already tracks on servers and storage systems against multiple types of traffic moving across a corporate network. The company has also added an OpsRamp NetFlow monitoring module that provides real-time diagnosis of network latency across wide area networks. With more employees working remotely, the need to analyze network traffic has become more acute, and AIOps increasingly is being used to effectively manage IT environments. It's now just a matter of time before AI is just another element in an IT ops platform. Over on Container Journal, we have the results of a report by Cloud Health by VMware that shows a spike in container adoption, increasing 37% between March and September 2020 alone. In addition, overall spend on containers increased 50% over the same period. However, the report also found that compute usage in the cloud dropped 3.5% in May and continued to decline on a month-to-month basis. That could be because organizations are getting more adept at optimizing cloud computing environments by using resources more efficiently and relying on discount pricing programs offered by cloud service providers. That shows a definite level of maturity there. The report shows that IT environments are diversifying at a faster rate, which is bringing with it a level of complexity that some organizations are having trouble managing. As a result, I expect we'll be seeing more organizations rely on managed services providers to manage their IT environments. And KubeSphere, an open source platform for managing Kubernetes environments, is now available as an AWS Quick Start. That will help simplify integration with third-party offerings through the Amazon Elastic Kubernetes service. KubeSphere is basically a distributed operating system for Kubernetes environments that includes an instance of the open source Jenkins CI/CD software, an application store for deploying applications using Helm charts and observability tools, and an instance of Porter load balancing software. It also supports Gluster FS, Ceph RBD, NFS, local PV storage, and other plugins that are compatible with the container storage interface. All right, over on Security Boulevard, we pose the question, what are the 5 elements of trustworthy digital transformation? Since the onset of the remote work era brought on by the COVID-19 pandemic, there has been a gold rush to upgrade IT infrastructures to support employees working from home. consumers consuming from home and everyone doing pretty much all they can from home. But while that's all well and good, effective security isn't keeping up with transformation efforts. Even as investments in cybersecurity accelerate, breaches continue to occur. Sustainable digital transformation can only be achieved by architecting security from inception rather than bolting it on as an afterthought. This article suggests consumers evaluate the 5 fundamentals of digital transformation: governance, investment, process control, consumers or customers, suppliers, and response of any company they do business with, doing their part to keep their data safe. And we have an interesting take on adopting a SaaS tool, specifically the 5 questions to ask when considering adopting a new SaaS tool. While SaaS tools certainly make life easier for many, especially developers who don't need to write new code or build an app on their own, but there are certain risks associated with adopting a SaaS app or tool and bringing it into your organization. This article offers up 5 questions every organization should be asking when looking to adopt a SaaS tool to determine whether it's a good fit for their environment, from both a security and a workflow perspective. All right, just a reminder that last week we had our Predict 2021 virtual summit. It's now available on demand if you missed any or all of it, or if the event was just so amazing you want to watch it again. It will be available on the Predict 2021 website, so you can always go look for it there. All of the sessions are now available on demand. So we had some amazing conversations during the summit, so I thoroughly encourage you to check it out if you did not get a chance to view it last Thursday or Friday. All right, that's it for today's headlines. I will be back tomorrow with a fresh new batch. But until then, have a great day, everybody, and please stay safe.
This is Digital Anarchist.
Everybody, welcome back to TechStrong TV. I'm Charlene O'Hanlon, and I am here now with Kev Breen, who is the Director of Cyber Threat Research at Immersive Labs. Kevin, thank you so much for taking a couple minutes and talking with me today. Really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me on. There's some important topics to be talked about, so looking forward to it.
Excellent. Well, why don't we start out by you telling us a little bit about Immersive Labs?
So Immersive Labs, we're actually about 3 years old, starting in the new year. And we're founded by our CEO, founder James Hadley, who was a former cybersecurity instructor for some companies in the UK. And what James realized was that traditional security training didn't really work, like classroom-based training. It wasn't brilliant. Mm-hmm. And he thought there was a better way of doing it. And that's what Immersive Labs formed. So the idea is it's practical, skills-based, like a hands-on approach, giving you just enough information to get you on your way so that you can learn by doing and develop those skills. So it ingrains a little bit deeper. And I joined James very early on this journey, employee number 8 or 9, I think, as a startup. And we've been going strong ever since. So that's kind of what Immersive does.
Excellent. So I imagine in your capacity as a threat researcher and just the nature of your company, you've been highly involved in some of the events that have unfolded over the last, there's obviously the very most recent, the SolarWinds data breach, but just the number of data breaches that have been occurring since the start of the pandemic. And it seems to me that organizations perhaps aren't as prepared from a cyber security stance as maybe they thought they were. So is that something that you guys have noticed, that maybe the collective intelligence regarding cybersecurity is maybe a little lacking these days?
I think there's a couple of really interesting points there. And like you said, 2020 has just been a year for it. And I'll ignore the SolarWinds bit just for a second. We'll come back to that.
All right.
You're right. So there have been some really high impact vulnerabilities that have hit over the course of the year. F5, Citrix, SaltStack. These are core, like enterprise level products. And they've all had serious critical vulnerabilities with them. And one of the biggest things we've seen is the attackers actually pivoting onto this and using them in some cases within hours of those patches being made public. So we're definitely seeing some high-profile vulnerabilities, and there are many issues there, and we're seeing attackers use them very, very quickly.
I'm sorry.
Then, like specific to the SolarWinds exploit, that really plays into DevSecOps because it wasn't the source code that was compromised. It wasn't a vulnerability in the application, in the software. It was actually that middle ground, that developer CI/CD pipeline that was compromised for bad intent.
Yeah, so that's actually what I was going to ask you when we were looking at these data breaches. How much of it is a DevOps problem, and how much of it is, or an application development problem, and how much of it is more of a, kind of an end user issue or fat finger mistake, things like that. Do you see more issues kind of happening during the CI/CD pipeline process, or are you seeing more of the kind of data breaches occurring because somebody did something that they should not have done, maybe during the deployment process or something like that?
I think it's fair to say that all those things are true. So the way SolarWinds were compromised, and some of this is still coming out in the news, so we're still putting pieces to this together. But they had some incredibly poor practices. There were some really weak passwords. Those passwords were exposed in public GitHub repos. Those were seen all the way back to 2019. I think it would be really unfair to blame it solely on bad practices for SolarWinds, whilst that was definitely a contributing factor. It's a very capable group that have actually gone in and compromised them. So I think you can probably count on two hands the number of times that level of compromise in CI/CD has happened to that large an effect. And that's because you need a really determined attack. You need a lot of developers and DevSec teams, like they don't understand their infrastructure. So for an attacker to have that level of understanding raises it up a bit. So I think we're definitely going to see more of it. But I definitely think that the more traditional vulnerabilities creeping through into code is probably the main focus.
Okay. So when we're talking about DevSecOps, or incorporating or shifting security left in the software development lifecycle, what exactly are we talking about? So are we talking about inserting security from a development standpoint, or more along the lines of securing the application as it moves through the CI/CD pipeline?
Again, it's one of those, is that all of those things are true.
Yeah, okay.
So in a more traditional approach, your developers will be given a feature to build or a product. They'll go and build that. That will go into CI/CD and it'll go around a couple of times, and then it will come out the other end, at which point a security team will pick it up and go, right, let's rip this to pieces. Right, here's all the things you did wrong. Spit that back in. And then that all goes all the way back far left. So shifting security left, there's a couple of key things. One is enabling your developers to understand security a bit stronger so that they're less likely to make mistakes. And a big part of that is to remove this kind of blame culture. So security teams can be very quick to, your code's rubbish, like why are you even putting that there? Not all code is written maliciously or poorly. Like sometimes it's just people don't understand the impact things can have. So enabling your developers to understand security impacts early on in the cycle, that's shifting it left. So it's not just about bringing your security left, it's about enabling your developers to understand the impact that those things can have, and then working closely with your security teams and the dev teams so that CI/CD pipeline has automated scanning and some manual scanning. I think all of those things start to bring it left, and that's gonna make the developers' lives easy as well, because if you're in something like Agile or Scrum, you're picking up a piece of work, you're delivering it, and then you're straight on to the next piece. So it's really hard to have shifted something on and then have to come back to it a couple of days later. Whereas if you've got those things earlier, you can stay
Mhm.
focused for a little bit longer and less disruption. So
Right. Yeah. Well, that makes a lot of sense, and obviously it's less costly to the organization too if if you catch all those things earlier. So it sounds like a great idea, but I don't understand why more organizations haven't really adopted DevSecOps, especially organizations that are quote unquote, rather mature in their DevOps implementations and their embracing of DevOps. Do you think that it's mostly a culture issue, or do you think that it's kind of a combination of lack of education and culture and maybe not having the right tools?
there's definitely some historic culture. I've been on both sides of this fence. I've worked as a developer, and now I'm a security engineer, and I've done these things. So, and I hate to say this, but there was nothing more exciting for me when I was in a security team to rip a load of code to pieces, to like find those vulnerabilities and go, "Hey, look what I did." And that was definitely a culture thing. It's one I have seen shift. I personally have moved this on, but it's a very easy thing to do. And developers like us in security, like it's the code they've spent time and invested in writing. So if your security team goes in hard and heavy, you're going to upset. And if people get upset, they go very defensive, and then like nobody's winning from that. So I think it's definitely there's definitely a culture thing. It's definitely getting better, but there's definitely more work there. And tools. We've seen an explosion over the last year or two in tools designed to put security into CI/CD. Some of these still aren't mature. Some of them are open source. Some of them are very expensive. So when you're looking at budget, it's like, do I hire more developers to build my thing quicker to get it out to make more sales? Or do I spend that on security, which is going to make everything go slower and means I don't have developers? So I think these large businesses, they look at the risk, and I think their risk calculations can sometimes come down on quicker means more money, whereas slower means more secure. I think there's a balance there. I think some of them are definitely getting it wrong.
Well, yeah. I mean, if you're looking at it straight from a dollars and cents point of view, you'd be a fool not to look at the long-term impacts of a data breach, and spending the money up front for a security tool that's going to help lock down that application is a whole lot better than spending millions later on cleaning up the messes that eventually will arise from a data breach. So, yeah, I think you're right when in fact, I know you're right when it comes to culture. That plays such a huge role, and we are starting to see a shift. But I don't think that shift is happening quickly enough. And this year, especially with a number of high-profile data breaches that have happened, when you combine that with the fact that a good portion of the workforce is now working remotely, and there are certainly security implications associated with that. I think it behooves organizations to try and push this, the whole concept of DevSecOps and really, really locking down their applications, push it to the forefront, because really, in some instances, the future of their company really depends on it.
Absolutely. And like we're seeing at the minute, so with SolarWinds, they were compromised, and that's affected 18,000 organizations around the world. And some of those are Fortune 500 companies, some of those are defense contractors, some of those are actual government and defense organizations. So it's not just like your own infrastructure you've got to worry about. If you're that pivotal, if you're that ubiquitous, your software, you have to consider the effect it's going to have on your customers. And good security hygiene, good security practice is just going to improve that across the board. So you're absolutely right.
Yeah, and it's not just their customers, but it's also their customers' customers and their customers' vendors. And because, it's like a root system, it just kind of filters out from there. If there's any sort of connected network, they're going to be vulnerable as well. So, yeah, so I think that I would hope actually that DevSecOps plays a much bigger role, a larger role in software development in 2021 and beyond. And I just can't see us moving down this path as slowly as we have been.
No, it's going to have to improve. And I think one thing that's really important for companies to take on board is removing like a culture of blame. We're all human, we're all fallible. If a developer or a security engineer or somebody makes inputs of vulnerability, and it might not have been malicious, it might not have been through bad practice, it might just happen. So making sure that your developers have a safe space where they can say, yeah, okay, I made a mistake. This is how we go back. This is how we do the lessons identified. This is how we improve it going forward, rather than just going straight to the blame and going like you messed up and like just going hard and heavy on them, because that's going to make the rest of the development team even less likely to work with your security team. So like culture, like we've said, is a key thing, and a safe space for your developers to report stuff and receive criticism and feedback, and for your security teams to be a little bit lighter when they're putting their reports in.
All right. Well, sage advice, and I hope that organizations take it to heart. And we hopefully, as a result, see fewer data breaches next year. But boy, this SolarWinds thing, it's not going away anytime soon. I have a feeling we're going to be talking about this for months to come. So anyway. All right, Kevin, thanks so much for your time. I appreciate it. And always love to have you on TechStrong TV to share your insights. So we'll have you back soon, I hope.
Thank you very much for having me. Looking forward to it.
All right, great. All right, everybody, please stick around. We've got lots more TechStrong TV coming up, so stay tuned.
Disruption is occurring across every aspect of IT. Open source, cloud services, DevOps, and cloud-native software architectures are democratizing IT and radically transforming how business is done. The old ways of creating software and doing IT are being replaced with agile, flexible, faster, and cheaper methods, benefiting vendors and users alike. Accelerated Strategies Group is out to democratize access of industry expertise and knowledge. We use our expertise and experience to offer insightful, intelligent, useful information in a variety of formats relevant to the IT community, digital events, videos, reports, assessments, workshops, and implementation projects with tech vendors, IT organizations, and business leaders. We widely and openly share our work products, often for free. Analyst reports these days aren't worth more than a graph or chart that tells a story or illustrates a market trend. We work with developers, DevOps teams, cloud architects, security engineers, and transformation leaders most every day, creating and implementing transformational strategies and technologies. We're not just thinkers, we're also doers.
Hey everybody, happy Monday. This is Charlene O'Hanlon, and I am here with the Monday edition of the Webinars Preview. As always, I tell you, we have a lot of great webinars coming up on DevOps.com, Container Journal, and Security Boulevard. And I wanted to let you know about 3 that are happening very soon. So in the hopes that you can get your calendar marked appropriately and join us. The first one is called Comparing Microsoft SQL Server 2019 Performance Across Various Kubernetes Platforms. This one is happening Tuesday, January 26th, that's tomorrow, at 11 a.m. Eastern. It's sponsored by Diamante. And it takes a look at the results from a recent performance benchmark study that compares the performance of Microsoft SQL Server 2019 on the Diamante Enterprise Kubernetes platform, as well as Amazon Web Services Elastic Kubernetes Service, and the Azure Kubernetes Service, also known as AKS. It also looks at some topics, including platform considerations and requirements for running Microsoft SQL Server 2019, performance comparison and analysis of running SQL Server on various platforms, and best practices for running containerized SQL Server databases in Kubernetes environments. The second webinar is happening Tuesday, January 6th as well. This one is at 1 p.m. Eastern on Security Boulevard. It's called Preventing Code Tampering and Verifying Integrity Across Your Software Development Lifecycle, and it is sponsored by Cycode. This webinar will discuss preventing code tampering across key phases of the software development lifecycle, including development, build, and production. And attendees will learn some actionable steps they can take now to harden their DevOps pipelines and increase the integrity of their software development lifecycle to minimize the risk of code being tampered with. Definitely a webinar worth checking out if DevSecOps is still in its infancy in your organization, or if you're having trouble making sure that your code is safe from tampering. So definitely check this one out. The third webinar is happening January 27th. That is Wednesday at 11 a.m. It's called Keep Calm and Secure Your CI/CD Pipeline. It is sponsored by WhiteSource. This webinar is all about shifting security left in the SDLC, the software development lifecycle, and focuses on how to create a secure continuous integration, continuous deployment pipeline, CI/CD pipeline. The speaker, Sonia Moiset, is lead security engineer at Photobox and tech lead and security manager at Pride in London. And she'll draw on her experiences in working with various technologies to create a secure end-to-end pipeline. She'll also go over some security concepts such as OWASP and show how to improve the workflow for your own open source projects using GitHub Marketplace applications. Good stuff all the way around, great security topic, and is certainly relevant for organizations of all sizes. All right, that's all I have for this edition of the webinars preview. Check back with me tomorrow. I'll have a fresh batch for you. Until then, have a great day and stay safe.
DevOps.com is the #1 online destination for DevOps education and community building. DevOps.com covers all aspects of DevOps, including DevOps best practices and tools, DevOps culture, DevSecOps, business impact, continuous testing, continuous delivery, and more. DevOps.com has the largest collection of original DevOps content, featuring breaking news, blog posts, podcasts, and more. Visit www.devops.com to learn more. DevOps.com, where the world meets DevOps.
All right, everybody, welcome back. In our final episode, our final segment for today, we have Analyst Corner with Mitchell Ashley. He talks with Chris Triolo of FireEye, and they talk about the need for extended detection and response technology and security automation as security operations center personnel are working with increased workloads. Great conversation. Let's give it a listen.
This is Digital Anarchist.
Well, I have the great privilege of being joined by Chris Triolo. Chris is VP of Customer Success at FireEye, actually coming over through a recent acquisition back in November 2020. Remember 2020, that thing that happened last year? Yeah. So with Response Software. Chris, good to have you and good to be talking with you today.
Thanks, Mitch. Nice to be here.
Great. Yeah, let's just have you introduce yourself. Tell us a little bit about you, a little bit about the company that's now part of FireEye.
Yeah, so I've been in information security for more than 20 years now, I will admit. I started back in the late 90s and was exposed to, basically 2 decades of this problem of, working with customers to protect themselves, from the bad guys, essentially. So I've been around for some time now. When I started, I was a practitioner. I was hands-on, doing, things like vulnerability scanning and penetration testing and all of that. And over time, I transitioned to business roles where I started to work with customers and started to kind of bridge that gap between the technical side and the business side, which I think is a really unique aspect of the InfoSec industry that I love about it, because it keeps us, you're rewarded keeping your skills up, right? But you get this opportunity to take on, executive and business roles. It's pretty fun.
Well, a lot of change. I was just happened to be saying today on a panel that I started in security in '98. Installed my first firewall, which was Gauntlet, running on Slackware Linux. That tells you, early days, it's just a proxy server essentially. But things have changed a lot. So you've seen a lot too, sort of like that State Farm commercial, whatever whatever it is, seen a lot. Well, tell us a little bit about Respond software, because you all are in the extended detection and response space, correct?
Yeah. Respond is we started Respond about 5 years ago, and we were trying to a problem for Security Operations Center and for the SOC analysts specifically. What it is a tool to help SOC analysts do that job of monitoring and triaging all the security alerts that come into a SOC. And, we have a new way of doing it. The old way is putting analysts in front of consoles, streaming hundreds or thousands of alerts, by their face all day, and they're supposed to then pick out the ones that are important, the real attacks, the real bad guys that are going to, create a problem for their organizations. It's a really hard job. It creates a lot of burnout. People are not able to sustain that kind of thing. And the security industry it's just not getting better. It's not getting easier. So what Respond does is it puts machines in the place of humans, right? Where machines can scale really well compared to humans. And it processes these alerts and prioritizes what is actionable. Mm-hmm. And the way that we did that is we built decision models that are, we taught the machine how a human thinks about the problem. Because when security alerts are first brought to a SOC analyst, assuming they had all the time in the world to investigate each and every alert, they would ask a series of questions. They wanted to understand more about that alert, where the source was from. Was it suspicious? Is it the first time they'd ever seen that source? The questions go on and on. What if you could take all of those questions and put those into a model and apply that to every single security alert that comes through the door? That's what Response software is all about.
There we go. Mike was cutting out on me there, but yeah, great place for automation, machine learning, things like that. Well, let's do this. I really would love to get your insights over the past year. We talk about 2020. Of course, a lot of things changed, and dealing with a lot of things in the IT industry and in the security industry. Our analyst firm's done a lot of research and data to show that the digital transformation projects accelerated significantly. So did adoption of the cloud. I mean, IT really used this as maybe because they needed to, but an opportunity to make some progress on some really strategic bets in software and technology. What have you seen as the downstream impact that sort of landed into the SOC security operations team's lap? Is it just volume of more stuff? Is it new applications? Is it new kinds of security issues because we're doing new, more digital kinds of apps, integrated apps and interactions with customers? What some of the things that happened in 2020?
Well, Mitch, I think we'd have to talk about COVID first. Yes. I mean, COVID defined 2020, even from an InfoSec perspective, right? And it really changed the game for SOC analysts and how we run and manage a SOC. The first most obvious thing is everybody got sent home, right? And this includes the SOC analyst. So the SOC analyst is not used to working from home. Usually we put SOC analysts in a secured facility, a secured room where they're working with the rest of their team and they're doing this sensitive security monitoring all day. Now we've put everybody, into their home offices or their dining room or their couch or, whatever. And it changes the way that a SOC operates, completely. Often, a SOC is very collaborative and you collaborate with the people that you work with. Junior analysts are mentored by senior folks and you discuss attacks and you're doing this in real time. Now imagine trying to bring that home, right? And to do it from there. There's going to be a lot of process change there. Things are going to slow down. And that's the opposite of what you want in a SOC, right? Because you need to move fast. We've got real attackers. You want to be faster, not slower. And so this was definitely an impact. And guess what? Organizations weren't ready for it, right? We know, disaster recovery, business continuity. We all built plans around that, right? The fires, the floods. What happens if our SOC burns to the ground? What do we do? Right? So you set up a warm or cold backup site. Okay, now you're going to operate out of there. Well, that's not our challenge with the pandemic, right? We can't even put people in the same room together because we're afraid they're going to, infect each other with the virus, right? And so, the strategy has to be different in the way that you continue to execute the mission, even though, you're not in the SOC any longer. The other thing that's just really unique about this situation is that COVID created is what do you actually monitor now? When all of your users are on site and within the corporate, network, you have a certain sensor grid, a certain, sensors that are monitoring things. Well, now everybody's sent home. So some of those sensors are useless now, inside perhaps, the organization because everybody's home. And now you need to make sure you have sensors at home to protect the users who've all gone to their home offices on their private little home networks that probably are not very secure, right? It depends on who you are. Us security guys, we might have good protection at home. Most average users don't.
No, the installer installs it and never gets touched.
Right.
Look if it gets upgraded.
I mean, that alone was a big scramble that we saw. Like when we talked to CISOs or CIOs, they were scrambling to get home users set up with laptops, phones, with VPN connections so they can securely access stuff on the corporate environment, right? But now, as a security guy, do I have access into those VPN connections? Who's connecting? Is there anything suspicious in the way that we're seeing connections, right, from your VPN? That's something that a SOC may not have been monitoring before, and now they have to. So it's that kind of thing that really sort of impacted the SOC through 2020 that probably no one could expect, But to answer your original question, with all the other things that we've seen, the move to cloud has really affected this story as well, because organizations are looking to how do you operate safely in the cloud? But from our perspective, from the SOC perspective, how do you monitor that? What do you monitor? What are the log sources or the alert sources that are available to you? And the answer is there's not a lot, or it's not as good as we need it to be to do this effectively. So you're seeing a lot of people scrambling, trying to figure out, how do I monitor my cloud environment, well, and not let that be an exposure point for us. And then as you see organizations just changing their infrastructures in these ways, having more hybrid approach, I think the volume of alerts has just continued to increase. It's just gotten worse over time. And we were supposed to get better at this with our security technologies, but it's actually the opposite. It's more and more alerts are coming in, and users are just inundated with it.
When the complexity goes up too, because you're right, you've added a new environment. Yeah, it might be your app, but maybe you've done a lift and shift. Maybe you're doing some cloud native development. But that's not an environment if you haven't operated in it before. You don't necessarily know all the tools, know all the logs and the kind of information that is or isn't in those, and what you have to supplement it with, and how you tie that into your SIM or not, or some data analytics kind of tool, like you're talking about with Respond. So it's a lot to throw at organizations, and usually it isn't you get to decide if you get to do it, you do it because it's where the business is heading.
Yeah.
And hopefully you have some input to understanding where that's going. But sometimes you don't even then, just because you're moving quickly or the kind of organization you might be. I'm curious what you think about. You originally were talking about person sitting in front of the screen watching the alerts flow by. I flashback back to IDS days, by the way, when you started talking about that.
Yeah.
That was certainly the problem back then. Yeah, you can only do that for so long, and you just get tired, you get burnt out, you miss things, and you can't miss things. It's a lot of pressure to put people under. And now you're going to say, do that at home with kids that need help with homework, and dinner's just about ready, or I need to run and get a prescription. And, life and work blend more closely together than they do in the SOC. True?
Yeah, that's exactly right. I try to picture how the average SOC analyst is able to transition to this home life and, stay focused on the mission, stay focused on that job of monitoring, without, kind of getting pulled away and, losing track. Some of these people, they've never worked from home before, right? And I remember when I sort of made that transition, I was at IBM at that time, and IBM promoted a work from home workforce, right? It was actually a thing, and we were all sort of excited about that, but we were also grappling with that because, how do you stay productive at home? It's really a change in routine and how you manage your workday. Some people, they work twice as many hours, right? Like they'll work extra time because the office is right there and they just, they never leave. But I think normally what you see is this productivity hit because people are really struggling with, this stimulus of having all of your home stuff around you. And it just completely changes the game.
It can be a bit of a double-edged sword for some environments where you can work, you know how to do it, or it works well for you. It can be a productivity boost if you're in an environment where you don't get lots of interruptions.
Right.
In other cases, it's just the opposite, right? I can't get the time. Once, it takes me 15 minutes to get back into where I'm really in the flow of the workflow and being able to recognize alerts or go back and research what I was doing. So it's a challenge. And I think it's even more so a challenge for leaders of those organizations because everybody's environment's different. Everybody adapts to it differently. Well, so it seems again like a great application for automation or aids that can help take the 80% of that away and give you the 20% you really need to look at, because that's what's valuable. And I assume that's that's the right percentages, but that's sort of the idea of what you do, with an XDR.
Yeah, that's exactly what XDR is all about. And you were kind of getting at it before also when you were just talking about the log sources and pulling the right info. We have the logs. The question is which logs and which information from the logs do we need, right? And if we understand what that is and we can extract it, we could do a way better job at identifying really what's, as we say all the time, malicious and actionable, right? If there's a problem and there's something, action that you need to take to do about it. Having one of the problems in our industry is too much data, too many logs. We've been taught to collect every log, to collect all the information. Why? I mean, sometimes it's because it's just in case, right? Just in case we need to go back and look at it, we'll have it, right?
We might.
Which is true. I mean, that does happen. And you're doing a forensics investigation. You want to be able to go back and look at, what you have. Sometimes it's compliance, like compliance requirements forces us to keep all this information. But what it does is it puts an undue burden on the people that are trying to monitor it for the bad stuff, right? Because now you've got so much to look at and it's, and it's hard to process. But this is where, machines come in. This is where the XDR comes in. And when we talk about response software, we could compare it to the SIMs of old, the way that SIM technology works. It was supposed to solve this problem. And it certainly solved the problem of log management, log collection, storage, all of that. But the way that you write correlation rules, the way that you look for bad things in the data, it's just too simplistic, and it's limited in, you may be looking for 3 or 4 or 5 conditions that, that as an analyst you thought of, and you pre-wrote rules to go scrub the data for these conditions. But what if you could write 24 conditions or 4 conditions, and they all linked together? And some of these facts that you're tying together are really important, like, the IDS signature, the severity, or the type of attack that it was. It's important information for the attacker, for the analyst to try to understand what the attack is. But what about all those other little pieces of contextual information? Some of the stuff I was getting at earlier, like this is the first time we've ever seen the source, right? Or I looked up the source automatically so that the analyst doesn't have to do it. I know it's coming from a suspicious country. I know that, let's say, it has a recent DNS registration. And so you know that somebody stood that up new. Now, does it mean that it's malicious? No, it's just another indicator. But what if I can tie all of these indicators, all of these facts together to, connect the dots, stitch it together, however you want to say that, all at once, and automate it so that humans don't have to do it? That's really what XDR is all about. It's the promise of bringing together a lot more data that helps you to really answer that question, but at machine speeds. So you can do this, all day, every day, and you don't have to put humans on it. And then we want humans managing incidents. We want them managing the output of that instead of managing events, right? Where they're trying to just scroll through these things. That's not the right job for humans. Humans are way better suited to do the deeper investigations and the actual management of those incidents, which always require a lot of coordination, collaboration inside an organization. Machines can't do that. Humans are great at that, right? And so that's where, let's get this right. Let's have the humans doing what humans do best.
What is sort of that tipping point where organizations go from, yeah, we can handle it, we'll deal with it, we're like a sponge, we'll so just keep sucking it up until it's too bad. But you get that point where, okay, we're saturated, we can take no more? Or is it organizations that say, look at our growth rate, we're going to outpace our resources and we can't just keep hiring more people, let's help our people work more effectively, and it's kind of being proactive? What tends to be the organization that's going to reach out to you and say, can you be here Monday and help me out?
Yeah, obviously, the most obvious answer is you've been breached. You didn't see it, right? Or you suspect that you've been breached, and or you realize that your capability is not catching bad guys. Bad stuff's happening, but you're not seeing it. So that's when you start to get the clue that maybe I need to reach out for help, right?
What we're doing.
One of the things that happens, this is kind of maybe the sort of the ugly secret behind it, I don't know. When a SOC is inundated with alerts, what do they do to manage that? How do they deal with that problem? They turn the alerts down. They send less alerts, right? It's like if the faucet's on too high, you turn the faucet down, right? What does that mean? It means you're seeing less. So let's say, you're going to blanket say, all right, we're looking at, critical, high, medium, and low. We can't keep doing this. There's too many alerts. Let's cut out those mediums and lows. All right, now there's still too many alerts. Let's get rid of the highs. So now we're only looking at critical. Now, is that a terrible strategy? No, I mean, it's okay, because I'd rather have the team looking at a small number of critical alerts and potentially missing some of this, but at least they're doing this well instead of doing everything terribly, right? And that's kind of the trade-off. But what we see, sorry, go ahead.
No, get to the important stuff, right?
Well, so what we see is that they reduce it, they turn down the faucet, And now they're only seeing a small segment, and then they're missing a lot. And that's when they may, over time they realize, okay, we just don't seem to be catching anything anymore. And we know that's not right. We know that that can't be possible because most organizations have a lot of, security stuff going on. And that's when they start to reach out for help. And that could take a couple different forms too. You've got the teams that decide with a little bit of outside help, we can do this ourselves versus let me just call a managed security services provider and outsource this problem to someone else. And that's a whole long topic in and of itself, especially, how do you make those decisions? And then having been in the industry for 20 years, watching that pendulum swing to let's send it outside to MSSPs. No, now let's insource it. Now let's put it out. And, companies will go back and forth, and making those wholesale changes is actually pretty disruptive to building a good, mature capability over time.
Interesting. Now, I think I asked you before about some AI machine learning and where those some of the techniques that you use, and I'm assuming that there's some, supervision, supervised type approach or tuning type period to help, adapt to your specific environment, your applications, the kind of logs that you get. Is that the case?
Yeah. Well, so we'll teach our models up front. We'll seed them, right, with our knowledge. And so in that way, they'll work out of the box, which is actually quite important because you don't want to spend months trying to train your system getting no value, right? Like you really need to kind of have an out of the box, capability, which is good. But now the product is in use. And what we did with Respond software is we crowdsourced the learning, if you will. And what I mean by this is we ask our users, when we escalate an incident to you, to give us essentially thumbs up or thumbs down feedback. Yes, this was a good incident and we followed up on it, or no, this wasn't good. And then what we will do is take that negative feedback and analyze it and say, okay, what was wrong with this escalation? How did we get it wrong? And then take that information and retrain the model. And that's where the machine learning part comes in, where we can reteach our models all the different scenarios of, what conditions equal malicious and actionable and what conditions are a likely false positive or not worth your time. And that's how we approach it. And what's super cool about it is the more users we have, the more customers we have, the more feedback we're getting, and we're making the analysts smarter every day. And so if you can, compare that to a human analyst get smarter every day. And that's great for your org, for your team, until they leave because they burned out or they got a new job or whatever. And all that knowledge goes with them. This analyst, stays with you, right? It's always smart and it's never leaves, right? And so all of that learning gets included. You might have heard me say something in that's really specific and important. We review it first before we make those model changes. We don't want to, at this point in time, we don't just based on our customers' feedback, automatically change things on the back end. Because, no offense to our customers, they may be exactly right, or they may not have assessed that right. Like they might have decided this was negative, or even that may be true, but we may not want to alter our models because of it. You got to understand, the scenarios. So we really put sort of a human in the middle of that process to make sure that we're comfortable with retraining the model based on that feedback.
Well, it seems it's true in many jobs. I think especially in operations where some consistency is helpful, right? If things are changing all the time, you don't know what to trust, right? So I can understand why you want to review that before you make those changes. And what is the typical tuning learning period to help adapt the models? Because that's always a balance, right? Is if we're on our 6th month of trying to do this, I'm not saying your software takes that long, but or our 6th day and hey, it's doing pretty well, or 6th hour, Yeah, that's a big difference to people. So that time to value idea.
Yeah, in general, with our deployments, because we've already seeded the models with expert judgment, they work out of the box within, the confines of sort of the first 1 or 2 weeks. Because within those first few days or a week or two, it's learning the patterns within your network. When I was mentioning have we ever seen this source address before? When you plug the product in, it will think, I've never seen this before, right? So, but a week later, it may say, yes, I see this every day, 1,000 times a day. The likelihood that this is malicious is actually, much lower, right? So that gets factored in. So once you understand the patterns, the network patterns, for example, that's really key to teaching our product what to look for, what's important and what's not, right? Mm-hmm. Over that time, then the customers start using the products, and really, it's within the first few months that let's just say 2 to 3 months that the product is running. They've given us enough feedback as to whether or not it's performing right in terms of giving good escalations or bad. And then we capture that feedback and make modifications as it were. And that's how our software works. The other kind of machine learning kind of software that is either I say kind of because there's so much nuance to how people are defining their AI or machine learning products. But we've seen the case where the ones that have to be taught over time and they're not in the supervised model, it's the unsupervised, this process could go on 3 months, 6 months, or even longer. Mm-hmm. And most organizations do not have time to do that. And it's too much of a burden to ask a SOC team, to do that. You'll get some small set of elite customers, call it the Fortune 50 and above, right? We're talking about people that have really big security budgets and teams that they may actually have an appetite for that kind of thing. And they may really dig it because they have the opportunity to really drive it themselves, right? They're the ones doing the teaching, which is, pretty cool. But most organizations, they just don't have that capacity.
Well, we're just about out of time here. One thing I did want to ask you, I know it's relatively soon, just November, that you all were acquired by FireEye. What's sort of some of the hopes and dreams of the acquisition of what you could do together? Better together than separate.
Yeah, it's really exciting. This is one of the first acquisitions I've been a part of where I really see, that better together story, forming for us. So, I've explained response software, right? And, we've got these decision models and that we've put our intelligence into, but FireEye Mandiant, the Mandiant threat intelligence side of the business and Mandiant's breach response and incident response services, these are some of the best in the industry, if not the best, right? Our breach services, they are exposed to the hypercurrent TTPs, right? Techniques, tactics, procedures that hackers are using in these attacks. That understanding, that knowledge, our threat intelligence that we're gathering all day, if we are able to put that into the respond brain, if you will, we're going to make headlines, Mitch. I mean, this is, being able to take that level of sophistication in terms of intel and feeding that into our models, making our models that much smarter, but, as important, current, right? Like as current as it possibly can be based on the, what we're seeing in the live in the wild, right? So that's really the promise. Our models improve, the analyst gets that much smarter, that much better. And how this helps Mandiant, if you will, that part of the business is we're productizing that intelligence, right? It gives Mandiant a way to get all of that intelligence and information via products instead of services out to the market, right? And so it's a cool way to think about it, that we're able to touch a lot more customers, and we could do it in a way that is quite frankly automated. You don't have to consume the intelligence as a human and apply it to your business. It gets brought right into the tooling that's doing the evaluation. So that's the cool part. That's what we're excited about.
That makes sense. There's a lot of you, Chris. Where can folks find out more?
Yeah, so I mean, come to our website. I mean, you can definitely go to the FireEye website. The Respond software website is still up and running. That's where you're going to find most of the information on Respond software. That's respond-software.com. Just one thing to point out is we just released our second annual SOC economics report with Poneman Institute. That's available to look at. A lot of insights about what SOC analysts are saying. We interviewed almost 700 SOC analysts. So you don't hear it from us, you hear it from the SOC analysts. You get the ground truth of what's going on in these SOC environments. What are they worried about? What are the challenges, et cetera? So I would recommend that folks go and look for that in particular.
It'd be a helpful aid in validating why you have so much workload or what you might anticipate. So great resource too. Well, thanks, Chris. Great to be talking with you, Chris Trialo, who is the VP of Customer Success with now FireEye, and wish you all the best. Come back and see us again. Let us know how things are going.
Will do. Thanks, Mitch.
You bet.
All right, that wraps up this episode of TechStrong TV. I hope everybody enjoyed today's content. We had some great conversations, I will say that. And we're going to have some even better conversations tomorrow. So I hope everybody can tune in for it and just listen to what we've got going on. So until tomorrow's episode, we will see you then. I hope everybody has a great day. And as always, stay safe.